At that time, Yuma could not even begin to imagine that one day, he would end up fighting alongside them. He somehow managed to get into a university, but even then he never really had a goal. Every day simply passed by the same way, and he was satisfied with just living like that. Then one day, while casually walking around, a feather suddenly landed on Yuma's head, and before he could think much about it, that moment arrived. A sudden hole opened beneath his feet, and he fell straight into it. A voice echoed around him, calling for the chosen ones to rise, and when Yuma finally woke up, he could only wonder where he was and who the people around him were. Soon after, an authoritative voice ordered everyone to stay silent. The man introduced himself as Burke van Gardgol, the king of the Gardgol Empire. The king immediately explained the situation. The people gathered there had been chosen to become heroes, and he requested their help in subjugating the demon lord and his army. Hearing all of that, Yuma quietly wished to go home already. He was the kind of person who hated anything frightening. One of the summoned people then asked what they would gain in return for helping them. Yuma could hardly believe someone could speak to a king so casually. A long-haired man answered that they would naturally be given proper treatment and rewards. He added that they would also be taught the lost arts once used by heroes in order to receive the blessings of the gods. Hearing that, the summoned person immediately declared that he would return home if those blessings turned out to be useless. The long-haired man calmly guided him forward. Meanwhile, Yuma could only wonder how that guy managed to speak so boldly. No, before even thinking about that, Yuma really wished the summoned man would stop advancing the conversation on his own. That was what he truly wanted to say. Seeing the fierce expressions of both the knights and the king, Yuma quietly realized there was no way he could refuse. And just like that, the story of the cowardly Yuma began. Later on, the long-haired man showed everyone the altar where the rituals would be performed. Cord looked at it in surprise and could only think about how much it resembled something straight out of fantasy. Another voice then greeted them and introduced herself as the Grand Priest, Edna Hans. Edna explained that they would now begin the ritual that would allow them to receive the blessings of the gods. After that, she instructed everyone to step forward one by one. The boastful man immediately volunteered to go first. As he stepped into the magic circle, the ritual began, and moments later, he was congratulated after receiving the blessing of the god of flame that judges sins, granting him the flames of hell. Next came another summoned person, who received the blessing of the Shinran of memories and was granted the power of ice. Everything progressed far more normally than Yuma had expected, and one after another, everyone received their own blessings. Watching all of this, Yuma quietly began praying for a blessing that could protect him from any kind of harm. Then Yuma's name was finally called, and panic immediately took over him. It was now his turn, and his heart felt like it was about to leap out of his mouth. One of the summoned people noticed how Yuma's hands and legs were awkwardly moving in sync while he walked forward. At the same time, someone else noticed that Yuma had dropped a feather. Soon after, Edna announced that the god of healing had bestowed upon Yuma the power of revival. The moment Yuma heard that it was healing-related, he immediately realized what that meant. It meant he would still have to take hits himself. Another man then approached the summoned heroes and praised their blessings, saying that all of them were truly remarkable as expected of heroes. He offered thanks to the gods for granting those blessings, prayed for the safety and health of the summoned people, and invited everyone to enjoy a luxurious meal. Meanwhile, Yuma quietly kept thinking about his healing ability. If he still had to fight, then that would be terrible for him since he hated pain and got anxious very easily. As he remained lost in thought, Edna quietly watched him from the side. After entering the dining hall, the man encouraged everyone to freely enjoy the food prepared for them. The moment Yuma saw the meal, his eyes widened with delight since he loved meat more than anything. At that moment, he even started thinking that maybe he could actually do his best for this world after all. Someone then called out to Yuma and asked if that was really his name. After Yuma confirmed it, the boastful man introduced himself as Keita Akanishi and pointed out that Yuma's blessing did not sound very useful for combat. At the same time, Takuya Araki mentioned that there were already too many people suited for the front lines, so things balanced out that way. Katomi then commented that she was actually glad they had someone capable of healing in the back row, since they would definitely need Yuma sooner or later. Hearing all of that, Yuma quietly realized that everyone was already treating him as a non-combatant. Still, he felt relieved that he probably would not have to fight directly, though part of him also felt a little bad about it. However, he quickly pushed those thoughts aside and reminded himself that he still had his own role in the backlines. Starting tomorrow, he planned to practice healing magic as much as possible. Later that night, Edna stated that the preparations were complete and that they could proceed with it tomorrow. She reminded the others that Yuma was someone important, so they needed to be careful in how they handled him. A man nearby acknowledged her words and agreed. The next morning, someone knocked on Yuma's door. When Yuma opened it, he found the priest standing there. Yuma asked if something was wrong, and the priest explained that he had something important to discuss. He explained that they were currently fighting against the demon lord, and because of that, they were suffering from a shortage of medicine supplies. Since Yuma possessed the power of revival, they wanted his help in treating the injured soldiers. Yuma willingly agreed and told him that he would do whatever he could. Yuma actually felt glad that he was already being assigned a role. The priest then handed him a uniform and instructed him to change into it since things would get dirty where they were going. As Yuma changed into the uniform, he quickly realized that it looked exactly like hospital clothing. Then, the moment he entered the room he was led to, a bad feeling immediately crept over him from the atmosphere alone. After being told to sit down, Yuma asked what exactly he was supposed to do for the injured people. But before he could even process anything further, he was forcefully pushed down into the chair. The priest then explained that they would be using Yuma's flesh and blood. Hearing that only left Yuma confused. Moments later, several people grabbed hold of him and restrained him in place while straps tightened around his arm. Yuma's eyes widened in fear as he completely failed to understand what was happening. Then the man pulled out a sharp knife, followed by a large syringe. Yuma still could not understand any of it, and the fear inside him only kept growing. The man calmly explained that Yuma needed to relax because he possessed the blessing of immortality. No wound or poison would ever be capable of killing him. That meant his body naturally carried whatever was needed to resist such things. Filled with anxiety, Yuma begged them to wait for a moment. He suggested that they should at least begin by simply drawing blood and that there was no need to rush things this way. He even tried to insist that maybe they were misunderstanding his ability. But before he could finish, one of the men suddenly chopped off his hand. The instant Yuma saw his severed arm, panic completely overtook him, and he screamed in terror. The priest asked whether the pain was unbearable or if Yuma was simply frightened. He repeatedly told Yuma to calm down because he was not going to die anyway. However, Yuma could not stop screaming, so the man slapped him and once again reminded him that he would not die. Then, shortly afterward, Yuma suddenly felt something strange happening to his arm. Confused, he stared at it in disbelief until he realized that his severed arm was regenerating and growing back on its own. The priest picked up Yuma's severed hand and admired it with fascination. He commented that this result had gone far beyond even his superior's expectations. At that moment, Yuma fully realized that it was only his second day in another world, yet his Isekai life had already turned into hard mode from the very beginning. And without hesitation, the man announced that they would now move on to testing drugs next. Elsewhere, two men discussed what they had just witnessed, talking about how incredible it was that they had finally obtained an immortal being this time. They believed that this meant they could finally deal with a certain monster once and for all. The scene then shifted to a woman with bandages wrapped around her neck. While quietly muttering that the child was still alive, she tightly held onto the feather that had once fallen beside Yuma. Using a feather of all things made her wonder what exactly was happening out there. Then a familiar scene appeared before Yuma. A voice talked about how Yamada had apparently decided to marry his girlfriend after graduating from university. The same voice reminded Yuma that he was already approaching his second year in university and that he should start thinking seriously about his future. But for Yuma, the future was never something he thought deeply about. Whatever happened would happen, and that alone had always been enough for him. However, the dreams suddenly shifted. What first began as a normal meal slowly turned horrifying as Yuma found himself being dismembered piece by piece. All the while, a voice continuously praised how marvelous it was, telling him that he should feel proud to keep serving people in this way forever. Yuma suddenly woke up gasping for air. As he sat upright, he coughed heavily before realizing in terror that it had only been a dream. Then the memories immediately returned to him. He remembered fainting during the experiments once again, which meant the same thing as always. The moment he woke up, the experiments would begin all over again. Yuma had grown exhausted from it. Day after day, the same nightmare repeated endlessly, to the point where he no longer even knew how many days had already passed. Then he suddenly heard footsteps echoing through the hallway. Realizing someone was approaching, Yuma tensed up in fear, though part of him desperately hoped it was only a patrol passing by. The moment he saw a figure's foot outside the room, terror completely overwhelmed him. He buried his face into the bed while quietly sobbing, desperately wishing for someone to save him. Then suddenly, a mysterious circle appeared above him. It slowly wrapped around his body, leaving Yuma completely confused about what was happening. Outside the room, the man wondered what that strange sound had been, but when they finally entered, Yuma had already vanished without a trace. Elsewhere, Yuma slowly woke up beneath a tree. His eyes widened in surprise as he looked around, unable to understand where he had suddenly ended up. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Takuya was calmly playing chess while remarking how surprising it was that this world even had chess in the first place. Nearby, Keita loudly demanded another match, making it obvious to everyone that he absolutely hated losing. Takomi pointed out that despite the two of them only recently returning from the dungeons, they were still full of energy. She then reminded them that it was already getting late and suggested they head to the cafeteria for dinner. However, she quickly realized that the two boys were still completely absorbed in their match. Takuya agreed that it sounded like a good idea and suggested they continue the game after eating. Meanwhile, Keita immediately started thinking about meat the moment dinner was mentioned. In the hallway, Takomi noticed several men talking among themselves and asked what was going on. The priest explained that there would soon be a conference, so everyone was in a hurry at the moment, and he told her not to worry about it. Takomi simply commented that they were working quite late and reminded them to take care. After that, the priest quietly instructed his men that under no circumstances should the summoned heroes ever learn about this matter. One of the men reported that the only place they still had not searched was the labyrinth. Hearing that, the priest muttered that Yuma was truly troublesome for someone who was supposed to be their subject. He then stated that he would request assistance from the other priests as well. He ordered his men to head toward the lower central levels of the labyrinth first and continue searching for the subject there. Meanwhile, Yuma remained lying beneath a tree, realizing that the situation was bad because he no longer had the energy to even move properly. He quietly wondered why his body felt this exhausted. Not long after, he heard footsteps nearby. One of the men walking through the labyrinth mentioned that he had heard rumors about the place before, but never imagined he would actually come this far down. The senior accompanying him explained that this area was restricted to priests and people of even higher rank. The younger man reacted in surprise and started speaking carelessly about what might exist further beyond this place, but the senior immediately became irritated and warned him to watch his mouth. Soon after, they noticed something attached to the wall. The senior explained that it was a trap designed for intruders. He also mentioned that because of the artifact he carried, the traps would not activate around them. However, anyone without such an artifact would only find death waiting ahead. At that same moment, Yuma continued wandering through the labyrinth. Then suddenly, one of the traps activated and instantly sliced his head clean off, causing it to roll across the ground. But only moments later, his severed head slowly regenerated. Before long, his entire body had completely restored itself, leaving him fully healed and alive once again. Yuma slowly stood back up and continued walking. To him, the entire situation felt like some horrible joke. The fact that his body could recover like that made him feel less like a human being and more like a monster. As he stared upward toward the sky above, tears fell from his eyes while he wondered why something like this was happening to him. Then, filled with frustration, Yuma cursed his situation and swore to himself that he would absolutely escape from this place somehow. The moment he started running, the three men spotted him, and one of them immediately attempted to chase after him. The senior quickly shouted for the foolish man to stop and warned him not to leave his position. But before the man could react, a giant witch-like hand suddenly appeared above him. The enormous hand grabbed him instantly and crushed him on the spot. The two remaining men could only stare in shock at the horrifying scene before them. The remaining man stared in confusion, wondering what exactly that terrifying thing had been. The senior then explained that the fool who recklessly rushed deeper into the labyrinth had triggered the instant death magic placed there by a magi to eliminate monsters. He added that even the artifact he carried would no longer protect them any further beyond that point. Hearing that, the younger man became curious about what exactly a magi was. For the time being, the senior decided that they would remain there and wait for the priest to arrive. At the same time, he quietly wondered why their subject, Yuma, had somehow not been killed by the instant death magic. Elsewhere, Yuma carefully looked around the area and realized how strange the place truly was. The further he traveled through the labyrinth, the more inconsistent everything seems to become. Eventually, he stopped to rest for a moment, and while quietly observing the surroundings, he realized that the place somehow reminded him of something he had once seen on television before. Then suddenly, an unfamiliar voice asked Yuma what he was doing there. The sudden voice startled him badly, and as he nervously asked who it was, the voice calmly instructed him to look down. Beside him was a hole in the ground. When Yuma carefully looked down into the hole, he found someone inside staring back at him. The woman introduced herself as Eva and then asked Yuma for his name as well. Yuma quickly realized that the person before him was a girl, and he introduced himself in return. As he looked more closely at Eva, he noticed several pipe-like objects attached to her body. Curious about her condition, he asked if she had also been subjected to human experimentation. Eva replied that it was something similar to that. She then asked Yuma if he too was being forced to undergo experiments in this place. Yuma confirmed it, and Eva quietly remarked how unfortunate that was. Afterward, she invited Yuma to relax there for a while since it was rare for anyone to come all the way down to that area. Eva then realized that Yuma was completely alone and asked how he had even managed to get down there by himself. At that moment, memories of everything that had happened resurfaced in Yuma's mind. He explained that it was fair to say he had been brought there by force. Curious about what he meant, Eva listened as Yuma explained that if he had not received the blessing of immortality, he probably would have died many times already by now. Hearing that, Eva wondered if Yuma was truly immortal. She pointed out that he did not appear any different from an ordinary human, which made him rather unusual. At the same time, she realized that this was likely the reason why he had been experimented on in the first place. Yuma then carefully observed Eva again and noticed that despite everything, she still looked fairly healthy. Since it seemed that she had also gone through something similar, Yuma politely addressed her as Miss, though Eva immediately told him that simply calling her Eva was fine. Yuma apologized afterward before asking whether she wanted to escape from this place together with him. Yuma admitted that he had absolutely no fighting ability at all. However, he believed that if he made proper use of his immortality blessing, then he might somehow be able to deal with the traps inside the labyrinth. More than anything, he could not bring himself to abandon a girl all alone in a place like this. Yuma then told Eva that they should escape from this place together, breathe fresh air again, and eat delicious food until they were completely full. After saying that, Yuma fell silent for a moment while waiting for her response. In truth, ever since arriving in this world, even Yuma himself had never once stepped outside properly either. Eva then brought up Yuma's earlier statement about dealing with the traps. Yuma confirmed that he planned to use his blessing of immortality for that purpose. If he moved ahead first, then he could handle the dangerous traps himself. However, Eva calmly told him that there was no reason for anyone to become accustomed to pain or fear if they still wished to remain human. Then she smiled faintly. Yuma tried to explain himself further, but Eva instead asked whether he could see all the pimple-like objects connected to her body. Yuma confirmed that he could. Eva explained that those things existed to continuously drain her blood every single moment of the day, without stopping. Hearing that immediately shocked Yuma. Eva then explained that because of it she constantly suffered from anemia. She lacked the strength to even move properly, which made everything troublesome for her. Because of that, Eva asked if Yuma could share some of his blood with her. In return, she promised that she would help him escape from the labyrinth. She also mentioned that despite how weak she currently looked, she was actually very strong. As Yuma listened to her explanation, he realized that the people experimenting on him were doing something very similar to Eva as well. He then told her that if blood was what she needed, she could take as much as she wanted because he would never die anyway. At the same time, Yuma extended his hand toward her, and Eva reached out to hold it while sealing the promise between them. The instant Eva touched his hand, a bat suddenly flew out from her palm. Seeing that startled Yuma, but Eva calmly reassured him that it was simply a part of her. One of the bats lightly grazed Yuma's skin and left behind a small wound. Then several more bats emerged from Eva's hand. Afterward, Eva revealed something attached behind her neck. It resembled a seal connected to all the pipes attached to her body. She explained that now she was finally able to remove it. Without hesitation, Eva tore it away herself. To her, it was not much of a problem, though she believed she had probably already consumed the blood Yuma had just given her. Soon after, Eva slowly rose up from below and declared upon the name of Eva Scarlet, the pure blood and true ancestor of Red, that she would free Yuma as promised. Then Eva leaned toward Yuma's neck and drank directly from his blood. At that moment, Yuma finally realized that Eva was actually a vampire. Meanwhile, Eva became impressed by the quality of his blood. After feeding from him, Eva gradually regained her strength and quietly wondered how long it had been since she had last fed directly like this. It had been such a long time since her body last felt this light. She thanked Yuma afterward and kissed him before remarking that since this was such a special occasion, they might as well make their escape in a grand way. Then Eva effortlessly picked Yuma up in her arms while thinking that she had found something rather interesting this time. Then Eva spread her large black wings wide open. Carrying Yuma with her, she immediately dashed forward through the labyrinth while flying at tremendous speed. As they moved ahead, Eva thought about how the magi aura she had sensed from her room would have to be destroyed if they truly intended to escape from this place. To her, the magi was the very first obstacle standing in their way. As they continued flying through the labyrinth, Eva suddenly noticed something above them. However, what puzzled her was the fact that the magi had still not responded at all. Soon after, they were suddenly stopped when a group of men appeared before them. One of the men immediately called out to Eva, asking whether she had managed to escape by using Yuma's immortal blood. Right after that, he ordered the others to prepare for battle. Eva casually remarked that the situation was not even enough to serve as a proper warm-up. The men quickly raised their shields and began firing magic attacks toward her. However, the flames they cast never even managed to touch Eva because a barrier-like force blocked every attack before it could reach her. Seeing that, the senior man was left stunned and realized that even mid-level magic could not slow them down in the slightest. Eva then remarked that if they truly wanted to challenge her, they would need far greater power than that. Immediately afterward, she formed a massive magic circle above herself before releasing an enormous fireball upward. Moments later, a huge explosion erupted throughout the area. The blast carved out a massive crater, and Eva calmly flew toward it afterward. For a brief moment, she even considered turning the entire place into a sea of flames. Meanwhile, from below, the three summoned teenagers noticed Eva flying overhead. Kotomi wondered why a monster had suddenly appeared outside and quickly realized that the person being carried by the creature might actually be Yuma. Without hesitation, Keita immediately leaped high into the air while carrying his spear and rushed straight toward Eva, demanding that she release Yuma. However, Eva instantly blinked behind Keita and prepared to cast another spell. Yuma quickly tried to stop her, but before anything else could happen, Eva released the spell directly in front of Keita. The attack blasted him away violently, and a large explosion erupted where he eventually crashed down. Kotomi and Takuya could do nothing but watch in shock as they desperately called out for Keita. Eva then commented that Yuma jumping in to stop her had genuinely startled her for a moment. In response, Yuma explained that the others had all been summoned into this world together with him. Eva calmly replied that what had already happened could not be undone now, though she believed the attack should at least slow them down for a while. Either way, the two of them had successfully made it outside. Eva then asked Yuma what he wanted to do from this point onward. Yuma answered that he wanted to find a way to return to his original world. Hearing that, Eva declared that she would act as his bodyguard from now on. Yuma admitted that the idea felt both reassuring and a little unsettling at the same time. Eva then reminded him that she had sworn to set him free. To vampires, promises carried tremendous importance. She also added that she fully intended for Yuma to entertain her properly from now on. Afterward, Eva continued flying farther away from the area while quietly carrying Yuma with her. All the while, Edna silently observed everything from a distance. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a mysterious figure was summoned before the head priestess. The head priestess informed him that she had a mission for him. His task was to recapture the immortal being from the vampire and bring him back. She also told him to freely make use of that particular tool if necessary. After some time, the two of them stopped to rest near a river somewhere far away. When Yuma slowly woke up, he looked around in confusion and wondered where exactly they were. Soon after, Eva casually asked whether he wanted to take a bath. The moment Yuma looked toward her, he was immediately shocked to see Eva completely naked. For Yuma, waking up to something like that was simply too overwhelming. At the same time, Yuma suddenly remembered hearing before that vampires were supposedly weak against sunlight. Then suddenly, someone emerged from the bushes nearby, startling Yuma once again. The man approached and handed him a set of clothes. Confused, Yuma immediately wondered who the person was supposed to be. Eva casually explained that the man was merely an acquaintance of hers, just a traveling salesman she had used her abilities on and turned into her slave. She then explained that mind control was one of the greatest strengths possessed by vampires. However, she reassured Yuma not to worry because as his bodyguard, she had no intention of ever turning him into her slave. Afterward, Eva mentioned that there was a large town nearby, so they should head there next. But before leaving, they first decided to eat. The moment Yuma saw the food, he became delighted immediately. While eating, Yuma grew concerned about what Eva herself would eat. Eva casually replied that she had already satisfied herself while Yuma had still been asleep earlier. Yuma then admitted that he could not really think of any fast way for them to earn money. At the same time, he honestly did not want to depend on mind control methods either. Eva responded that there actually was an easy way. She explained that if they hunted monsters and sold the materials to the guild, they could quickly earn a large amount of coins. However, in order to sell monsters properly, Yuma would first need to register himself as an adventurer. Hearing all of that made Yuma quietly realize once again just how fantasy-like this world truly was. A short while later, Yuma suddenly noticed how unusually quiet the surrounding area had become. The place almost felt completely empty. Eva agreed with his observation, and immediately afterward, she suddenly flew away from the spot. Only moments later, all kinds of monsters suddenly came rushing straight toward Yuma at once. But before any of them could even get close to him, Eva instantly appeared behind the monsters and cut them down one after another. At that point, Yuma finally realized why the area had felt so quiet earlier. All the monsters nearby had actually been running away from Eva the entire time. After looking at the pile of defeated monsters, Yuma wondered how exactly they were supposed to carry all of them back. In response, Eva casually suggested using Yuma's item box. Hearing that only left Yuma completely confused. Eva informed Yuma that all summoned people possess the ability to use an item box as long as they called upon it properly. Hearing that immediately surprised Yuma, since it was the very first time he had ever heard about such a thing. Eva then explained that he should also possess an appraisal skill, and if he classified the monsters now, it would make things easier for him later. As Yuma attempted to call forth the item box himself, he quickly realized that it truly was the legendary item box he had only heard about before. To his surprise, it was completely real. At the same time, he also discovered that he could freely control various functions connected to it. Not long after, Eva suddenly sensed something again and immediately flew away. Moments later, a worm-like monster suddenly started moving nearby, shocking Yuma since he had thought it was already dead. The creature then spat a black substance directly toward him. However, before the attack could even reach him, a magic circle suddenly appeared automatically and blocked it completely. Yuma stared at the scene in surprise, wondering if that had been magic since he himself had done absolutely nothing. Looking down at his own hand, he quietly realized that the phenomenon felt exactly the same as what had happened before. Soon after, Eva returned and mentioned that the sun was about to set already. She explained that her acquaintance had a place nearby and suggested that they stay there for the night. Yuma agreed without much hesitation. Later on, Yuma became visibly frightened the moment they arrived in front of what looked like a haunted house. Meanwhile, Eva casually remarked that the place was just as popular as always. Soon after, they were greeted by an old man who commented that it had certainly been a long time. Eva greeted the elderly butler in return, mentioning that he still looked lively as ever before asking whether there was an available room for them. The old butler assured her there was and politely guided them inside. As they entered the mansion, Yuma quickly realized that the place was filled with frightening monsters everywhere. Then, after being shown into a room, the butler politely told them to make themselves at home before leaving. Once inside, Yuma noticed that the room itself actually looked fairly decent. It was completely different from the horrifying atmosphere he had expected, though honestly he was perfectly fine with that. After looking around, Yuma noticed that there was only one bed in the room. Eva casually replied that the coffin there belonged to her before asking if Yuma would rather sleep together with her instead. Yuma immediately refused the idea. As expected of a vampire, Eva naturally slept inside a coffin. Meanwhile, Yuma became somewhat embarrassed after realizing she had misunderstood his concern. Later that night, just as Yuma was about to sleep, something suddenly crawled out from beneath his blanket. The moment he checked what it was, he let out a terrified scream that echoed throughout the entire house. The next morning, Eva casually mentioned that the cute ghost seemed to have become extremely fond of Yuma. Meanwhile, Yuma complained that he had not managed to get even a single moment of proper sleep because of it. The ghost continued floating around him everywhere, making it seem like it intended to follow him even after they left the mansion. Yuma then pointed out that there was no way he could properly register as an adventurer while having a ghost sitting on his shoulder the entire time. The butler then told Yuma to use a spirit stone. Eva explained that spirit stones were normally used to house spirits, though they should also work for ghosts as well. If Yuma kept the ghost inside the stone, he would likely be able to walk around freely without attracting attention. She also mentioned that he could simply think of it as something like a guardian spirit. For Yuma, the ghost did not seem particularly dangerous anyway, so he figured it would probably be fine. Later on, the two of them arrived at the Adventurers Guild. Yuma approached the reception desk and stated that he wanted to register as an adventurer. The receptionist then informed him that they first needed to appraise him there. While wearing the spirit stone, Yuma thought it was actually pretty impressive that the ghost was no longer drawing attention. Still, despite that, he could feel that people were definitely staring at them quite heavily. A few moments later, the appraisal process was completed. Yuma was informed that whenever he bought or sold monster materials, he would need to present his adventurer card as proof of identity. Hearing that made Yuma think that he should finally be able to start earning money properly now. The receptionist also added that the adventurer card could function as a personal ID as well, so he needed to keep it somewhere safe. Then suddenly, a man approached Eva and casually started flirting with her, suggesting that she abandon the weak-looking Yuma and spend time partying with them instead. Seeing that situation unfold immediately made Yuma nervous, and he quietly wondered what exactly he was supposed to do while Eva was getting hit on right in front of him. However, Eva simply rejected the man without hesitation, pushed him aside, and declared herself to be the devoted type instead. Afterward, Eva excitedly suggested that they head to the dungeons next, while Yuma still looked exhausted from lack of sleep. Even so, Yuma agreed, though before going, he decided that he wanted to check Eva's stats using his appraisal skill first. Once they entered the dungeon, they immediately encountered all kinds of monsters. However, as usual, Eva remained completely calm and unfazed by them. Later on, Eva was standing on top of piles of defeated monsters while commenting on how amazing it felt that monsters were actually attacking her first for once. Meanwhile, while checking Eva's stats, Yuma noticed that her status actually had something resembling a monster aggro toggle. Curious, he decided to switch it off. Eva was genuinely surprised that summon people were capable of doing something like that too, and she became interested in looking into it further herself. Yuma quickly warned her to make sure nobody discovered her true identity, which meant absolutely no revealing her wings. Meanwhile, he planned to focus on collecting all the dropped monster materials himself. Then suddenly, the cute ghost emerged from the spirit stone again. Yuma asked if it was planning to help him, and before long, the ghost actually began assisting him in collecting all the monster drops. Looking at the amount of loot they had gathered, Yuma realized that money probably would not be a problem for them anytime soon. Up until now, everything still felt almost dreamlike to him. He still had not fully processed everything happening around him, but at the very least, he no longer felt completely alone anymore. Then suddenly, someone grabbed Yuma from behind and forced him down while even gagging his mouth to stop him from making any sound. Meanwhile, Eva returned and immediately started looking around for Yuma, wondering where he had suddenly disappeared to. Then Eva suddenly sensed something behind her. The moment she turned around, a huge man launched a powerful punch toward her that shattered the ground beneath him. Fortunately, Eva managed to dodge the attack and leap upward just in time. After landing, she coldly declared that she would only ask once before demanding to know where Yuma was. The enemy simply laughed and commented that, as expected of a pure-blood vampire, Eva's defenses were truly impressive. Then, wanting to test her further, he ordered his companion to attack. The second enemy instantly rushed toward Eva at incredible speed and unleashed a relentless series of rapid attacks against her. As Eva defended herself, she quickly realized that the attacker was a ghoul. However, something about him felt completely unnatural. Soon after, Eva noticed markings carved into the ghoul's arms and realized that it was an undead creature enhanced with holy magic. Then one of the attacks finally landed directly on her. At the same time, high-level restraints suddenly activated around Eva as well. Realizing what was happening, Eva finally understood that these people were part of a search team sent by the church. The enemy then mocked the sight of a pure-blood vampire reduced to such a miserable state, praising the central church while finding amusement in seeing Eva's beautiful face twisted in frustration. Meanwhile, from a distance away, Yuma remained tied up while helplessly watching the situation unfold. He immediately realized that something was seriously wrong with Eva. Then suddenly, a magic circle glowed around Yuma's arms, and in the next instant, all the restraints binding him disappeared completely. Yuma stared in surprise after suddenly freeing himself, wondering if this phenomenon was the same kind of thing that had happened the previous day. Without hesitating any longer, Yuma decided to risk everything. He immediately formed defensive magic and desperately commanded it to reach Eva as quickly as possible. At that moment, Eva was still kneeling on the ground when she suddenly realized that the restraints binding her had been dispelled. Then the giant man attempted to attack Eva once again. But just in time, Yuma arrived together with the defensive magic he had cast, and the barrier successfully blocked the man's devastating punch. Yuma immediately asked Eva if she was alright, and Eva confirmed that she was still fine. However, she explained that her magic power had become unstable, which meant she could no longer properly use magic at the moment. Hearing that, Yuma immediately started thinking. If the issue involved her magic, then he believed he might actually have an idea. Eva suddenly realized something and asked whether the magic that had just activated was actually Yuma's doing. Yuma confirmed it while nervously explaining that it was some kind of instant teleportation ability. He also mentioned that he seemed capable of using barrier-type magic as well. While explaining all of this, Yuma looked visibly anxious, but Eva calmly told him to relax and not panic. Meanwhile, the bald man wondered how Yuma had managed to get over there so suddenly. However, he quickly decided that it did not matter since Yuma would not die anyway. Without hesitation, he ordered his subordinates to tear the two of them apart. As the enemies attacked once more, Eva immediately prepared herself. She grabbed Yuma and managed to dodge the incoming attacks while flying through the air. At the same time, a mage among the enemies activated magic using a staff-like artifact, causing a massive magic circle to form on the ground beneath them. Eva instantly recognized it as a magical barrier specifically designed to be impervious to physical attacks. It became obvious to her that the enemies had come fully prepared to prevent her from escaping. Then the bald man tossed something toward the ghoul and ordered him to use it. The object resembled some kind of potion. The ghoul immediately bit into it, and shortly afterward he unleashed a massive fire blast directly toward Eva and Yuma. As she watched the attack, Eva realized that it contained even more high-level holy magic. Yuma reacted quickly and successfully blocked the blast with his magic. Seeing that, Yuma himself became surprised that he had actually managed to do it. He quietly thought that maybe he was finally starting to understand how to use these abilities. He then told Eva that he believed he could also use another teleportation-type spell. If he fully utilized it properly, he thought they might even be able to counterattack. However, Yuma admitted that he still had not fully gotten used to teleportation yet, so he needed time to focus and concentrate. Eva smiled after hearing that and remarked that Yuma truly was interesting. She then explained that the magic Yuma was currently using was ancient magic. Unlike the magic of the current era, which required understanding and formulas to properly use, ancient magic functioned through pure intuition and emotion instead. Judging from the lack of symbols within Yuma's magic circles, there was no mistake about it. Eva then instructed Yuma to focus on visualizing his own will clearly. Just then, the ghoul suddenly leaped directly in front of them and prepared to unleash another attack. But at that exact moment, Yuma activated a teleportation magic circle. Instantly, the ghoul's attacking arm was teleported behind his own body, causing him to accidentally strike himself instead. Yuma stared in surprise after realizing that he had actually succeeded. Eva also found the result impressive. However, the ghoul collapsed only briefly before standing right back up moments later as though nothing had happened to him at all. Yuma quickly realized that the attack had not truly affected the enemy. Eva, meanwhile, was stunned after recognizing the terrifying nature of the ghoul. It was an undead creature capable of using holy magic while also possessing resistance against it. The bald man then handed the ghoul another potion, which he immediately drank without hesitation. And that was the moment Eva finally realized something grim. The enemy they had just faced had committed a taboo. The bald man admitted that even he himself had been shocked when the church first handed that thing over to him. He then assumed that Yuma truly knew nothing at all, and because of that, he began explaining how the world's magic worked. Magic was originally a power possessed only by magical beings. The magic humans used was merely borrowed power taken from spirits or divine beasts and nothing more. Because of that, even when using magic of the same level, human magic could never truly compare to the magic wielded by genuine magical creatures. That was precisely why the church created the Ghoul Child. It was a monster loyal to humans, a weapon capable of using holy magic against other monsters of its own kind. The bald man then pointed out that Yuma should think carefully about how the church managed to create such an extraordinary ghoul in the first place. From birth, children had been raised specifically for the purpose of becoming ghouls. Hearing that revelation immediately left Yuma stunned. Yuma could not understand how the bald man could speak so proudly while talking about sacrificing children like that. However, the bald man denied calling it sacrifice at all and clarified that the children had merely been orphans. According to him, they had simply made use of lives that had already been discarded and considered worthless anyway. At that moment, Yuma realized that although the bald man looked human on the outside, in truth he was no different from a monster. Eva then stated that alchemy, which distorted natural reason, was considered taboo. She already knew that the church would steal magical power in order to create chimeras, but even for her, this situation had gone far beyond acceptable limits. The bald man simply responded that Eva's way of thinking was outdated and archaic. Yuma then asked Eva if he could speak with her for a moment. However, the bald man interrupted, saying that they had already talked long enough and that it was time to return to business. Once again, the enemies prepared another attack. The ghoul launched another massive fire blast directly toward Eva and Yuma. But in the next instant, both of them suddenly vanished completely. Moments later, Yuma and Eva reappeared directly behind the ghoul. Eva immediately activated her mind control ability and informed Yuma that the effect would only last for a brief moment, so he needed to hurry. Without wasting time, Yuma grabbed hold of the ghoul's head and activated a force block spell. Almost instantly, the ghoul lost consciousness. Watching this, the bald man became confused, unable to understand what exactly Yuma had done. Yuma then declared that he was taking the child with him. As payment in exchange, he told the enemies to take something in return. At that moment, he activated teleportation magic beneath the ground itself. The bald man stared in shock after realizing too late that what had been teleported beneath them was the ghoul's own fire blast. Moments later, the attack exploded directly underneath them. The enemies died immediately after the explosion. Afterward, Yuma and Eva quietly walked away while carrying the unconscious boy with him. Eva commented that their first day exploring the dungeon had certainly not gone as expected, though they had ended up obtaining some rather unexpected loot instead. Eva admitted that she had been genuinely surprised when Yuma suddenly decided he wanted to take the ghoul child with him. Still, the idea sounded interesting enough that she decided to go along with it. She then asked Yuma what exactly he planned to do with the boy from now on. But before receiving any answer, Eva noticed that Yuma had already collapsed behind her. After some time, Yuma was already resting with the cute ghost quietly staying beside him. As he slowly woke up, he looked around in confusion and wondered where exactly he was. Eva greeted him and asked how he was feeling. Yuma replied that he did not feel too bad, and then he asked whether this place was the same and they had visited before since his memories still felt somewhat blurry. In response, Eva gently placed a wet towel on top of his head. As soon as Yuma smelled the towel, he asked what that pleasant scent was because it smelled surprisingly nice. Eva explained that the master of the house had prepared it for him personally. She then reminded Yuma that after everything that happened in the dungeon, he had been so exhausted that he completely fainted, despite being immortal. Eva explained that physical exhaustion could easily be treated through magic, but mental exhaustion was a different matter entirely. Right after saying that, she suddenly started removing Yuma's clothes while insisting that a massage would be the best solution. Yuma immediately panicked and quickly insisted that he was completely fine already. Eva casually replied that he did not need to react so stiffly about it. Afterward, she mentioned that she planned to head into town for a little shopping. The moment Yuma heard that she intended to go into town, he immediately remembered the incident from the dungeon. Concerned, he warned Eva that it might still be dangerous outside. However, Eva reassured him that the town maintained extremely strict rules against violence and disturbances within its walls. As long as she stayed inside the town, there should not be any problems. With that settled, Eva instructed the cute ghost to look after Yuma while she was gone. At that point, Yuma suddenly remembered the child they had rescued in the dungeon the previous day. In the heat of the moment, they had apparently brought him back together with them. Left alone with his thoughts, Yuma quietly reflected on everything that had happened. He realized that he himself was the true target of the church. As long as others remained with him, they would continue being placed in danger because of him. He quietly wondered whether it was really alright for things to continue this way. One of the servants then noticed Yuma's troubled expression and asked if something was bothering him. Yuma honestly admitted that he truly was worried. From now on, the church would likely continue hunting him endlessly. That was exactly why he felt incredibly grateful to have Eva by his side. However, if Eva were to get captured again because of him, he would never forgive himself for it. The servant calmly reassured him that there was no need to worry about Eva. According to the servant, Eva possessed far more strength than anyone could possibly imagine, along with an unbelievably cheerful spirit. Meanwhile, inside the town, Eva casually walked through the streets when a vendor suddenly called out to her, offering fresh fruit at a discounted price. Eva briefly considered the offer and stopped to examine the goods being sold. After purchasing some fruit, something nearby suddenly caught her attention. She overheard a group of adventurers discussing reports about a massive pack of dire wolves gathering inside the forest, supposedly numbering in the hundreds. Another adventurer insisted that all adventurers in the guild needed to assemble immediately. One man explained that according to a witness, a single enormous direwolf was leading the entire pack. Another adventurer looked confused since, as far as he knew, all direwolves were already massive creatures to begin with. Then one of the men noticed Eva walking toward the direction of the forest and quickly warned her not to head there because it was dangerous. Eva simply thanked the man for his concern. Then, in the very next moment, she flew away at incredible speed, leaving behind a powerful gust of wind that stunned the adventurers watching her. The other adventurer quickly told his companion to calm down because they still were not fully prepared to head into the forest yet. However, the man insisted that they needed to move soon and urged the others to finish gearing up immediately. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, several direwolves surrounded a frightened couple while growling menacingly at them. One of the direwolves suddenly lunged forward to attack, and the man desperately managed to block the attack with his sword. However, the beast's overwhelming strength sent the weapon flying from his hands. As the direwolf's jaws closed in on him, he realized there was nothing left he could do. But then suddenly, the sword flew back through the air and struck the direwolf instead. The man immediately urged his companion to run, and the two of them quickly escaped from the area. At that moment, the direwolf spoke after recognizing a familiar scent. It realized that a little bat had appeared once again to interfere with its business. The direwolf snarled as it declared that after spending 400 years within this forest, it had become the true master of the land. From there, it intended to destroy the nearby human settlements in order to further increase its power. Soon after, two direwolves rushed directly toward Eva. Eva, however, remained completely unfazed as she stood there calmly. Then, with one swift movement, she instantly sliced off one of the direwolf's heads. Afterward, Eva mocked the creature, casually commenting on how it dared boast about living only a few hundred years. She remarked that a young creature like the direwolf should not behave so recklessly. Then Eva slowly began to shapeshift. As her appearance changed, she explained that she had long been fond of the town nearby and that her companion was currently resting there. After saying that, she calmly asked the direwolf what business it claims to have there again. The moment Eva fully transformed into her wolf form, the master direwolf's entire aura changed completely. Fear overtook it immediately, and the once aggressive beast became completely subdued before her presence. Back in town, Eva casually spoke with one of the adventurers and remarked that things seemed rather lively around the area today. The adventurer recognized her and admitted that he had genuinely been worried about her because the forest had become dangerous recently. He then asked if she had actually gone into the forest earlier. Eva simply replied that it seemed the wolves had merely been passing through the area. After Eva walked away, the adventurer suddenly noticed a star-shaped petal left resting on his chest. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Yuma gently patted the unconscious child's head while quietly wondering if the boy would remain like this forever. The servant explained that without a master, it was possible the child might remain asleep indefinitely. Furthermore, if he continued without eating for too long, his body might slowly begin decomposing as well. The servant then explained to Yuma that emotions were troublesome things because before someone even realized it, those feelings could eventually become overwhelming. Because of that, there were times when acting selfishly was equally important. After saying that, the servant excused himself, mentioning that it was probably time for him to leave for now, though Yuma could call for him any time if he needed anything. Left alone again, Yuma quietly leaned back against the bed. Then shortly afterward, the servant returned to inform Yuma that supper was ready. However, upon entering the room again, he noticed something lying on the floor. It was a white feather flower, a flower known for helping relieve fatigue and depression. And as the servant remembered, according to florography, the meaning behind that flower was a quiet wish for someone's happiness. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, 3 adventurers encountered several undead blocking their path. The leader cursed in frustration, calling the creatures nothing more than simple undead as he swung his weapon and cut several of them down. One of the adventurers pointed out that the undead just kept appearing no matter how many they defeated. The female adventurer reminded their leader that this mission was only supposed to be a simple scouting operation in the first place. The group paused briefly to steady themselves, but the moment they turned around, they discovered even more undead lurking behind them. Standing at the center of the undead horde was a lich leading them all. Meanwhile, back at the inn, a crow arrived carrying a message. The servant retrieved the letter and quietly read through its contents. Inside the room, Yuma was suddenly called over to look at something. It was Eva, who had apparently dressed the unconscious child while he remained asleep. Scene that immediately shocked Yuma. However, Yuma quickly panicked after noticing that one of the child's arms had been removed. Eva calmly attempted to reattach it while Yuma anxiously asked what they were supposed to do if it would not regenerate the same way his own body did. Eva explained that the cells in the arm were already completely dead, which meant regeneration was impossible even with magic. Because of that, she had decided to try attaching an entirely new arm instead. At that moment, the servant knocked on the door and politely excused himself while asking if it was a good time to enter. Eva immediately became irritated, pointing out that they were obviously busy at the moment while they continued wrapping the child in bandages. Later on, the servant Davis prepared tea for them. Eva complimented his tea, mentioning that it was as splendid as always. Afterward, Eva's expression shifted slightly as she asked Davis what the matter was. Davis informed them that word had just arrived reporting that a large group of undead was rampaging throughout the eastern mountains. More importantly, it had been confirmed that an extremely powerful lich stood at the center of the entire outbreak. The word lich lingered in Yuma's mind. If he remembered correctly, they were known as the kings of the undead. Eva remarked that, as expected of Davis, he always seemed to know exactly what she wanted. She then asked him just how powerful this lich appeared to be. Davis explained that judging from the overwhelming miasma spreading throughout the forest, along with the sheer number of undead under its control, there was no doubt that this was a high-class lich. Eva calmly responded that if that was the case, then they could simply override it instead. Confused, Yuma asked what exactly she meant by overwrite. Eva explained that they intended to overwrite the ghoul child's control authority. Davis further explained that at the moment, the ghoul currently had no master controlling him. However, unless they overwrote the high-grade control authority magic connected to him, there would be no way for anyone else to become his master. Yuma slowly understood what they meant. However, he then realized something troubling and wondered if doing that would effectively make the lich become the ghoul's new master instead. Eva smirked and asked Yuma if he truly thought she would allow something like that to happen. She explained that control authority could be transferred, which was exactly why she intended to make the lich cooperate with them. She herself would take control authority over the ghoul. And if the lich refused to cooperate, then she would simply bend it the same way she casually bent the spoon in her hand. Later, as they prepared to head out, Davis handed Yuma a letter and instructed him to deliver it to their informant. He also warned Yuma to be careful since the eastern mountains were filled with venomous insects. Hearing that immediately frightened Yuma a little. However, Eva quickly interrupted and questioned what Davis was even talking about before casually pointing out that they would simply be flying there anyway. Later on, while flying across the eastern mountains, Yuma noticed that the cute ghost had suddenly moved ahead of them. Curious, he asked where exactly the ghost was heading. The ghost floated around as though searching for something before eventually noticing someone nearby and immediately drifting toward that direction. Eva followed after it, and soon they discovered a woman dressed entirely in white. After landing, Yuma politely greeted the woman and asked whether she was the informant they were supposed to meet. But the moment the woman slowly turned toward them, Yuma became completely terrified by her appearance. Eva immediately recognized the woman as a banshee and calmly handed over the letter. Meanwhile, Yuma had already collapsed from shock nearby. As the banshee quietly read through the letter, she confirmed the information within it and stated that she would deliver her report. She explained that there was currently a massive nest of undead deep inside the forest. Everything that lived eventually rotted, and everything that rotted continued living again. Because humans had already deemed the area far too dangerous, there was no longer any point in sending adventurers there anymore. Even undead creatures themselves considered the current situation harmful. The banshee further explained that as the miasma thickened throughout the forest, undead creatures gained more power from it. However, with that increase in power also came unbearable pain. The lower-grade undead currently rampaging because of the miasma were suffering tremendously because of it, and so, the Banshee quietly pleaded for them to save those undead creatures. Eva calmly responded that unfortunately they were not there for the Banshee herself, and clarified that their true goal was the Lich. Then Eva reached out her hand toward Yuma and helped him stand back up. Afterward, she explained that because of that, they intended to deal with the miasma itself for their sake. The Banshee then informed Eva that seeing through the thick miasma from the sky would be impossible, meaning Eva and Yuma would need to continue on foot from there. As they continued walking deeper into the area, Yuma gradually realized that breathing was becoming more and more difficult the farther they went. Eva quickly noticed him struggling and explained that the miasma was beginning to affect his body. She casually added that, of course, he would not actually die from it anyway. Then suddenly, Eva transformed into a normal-sized wolf form. She told Yuma to climb onto her back, pointing out that traveling that way would be much easier for him. And after Yuma climbed onto her, he quietly noticed how surprisingly soft she felt. With that, the two of them continued onward to meet the Lich. Then they continued traveling deeper into the area with Yuma riding on Eva's back. After some time, Eva suddenly came to a stop. She complained that the thick miasma was making her sense of smell feel strange and unpleasant. Then she wondered if the little ghost could guide them the rest of the way instead. Eva explained that ghosts were naturally drawn toward the presence of a Lich, so she asked the cute ghost if she could rely on it. The little ghost agreed, and shortly afterward, it began leading the way for them. Along the path, they encountered several undead creatures wandering through the forest, but the group simply ignored them and continued forward. Seeing all the undead reminded Yuma of something, and he asked whether the little ghost might also eventually go wild like the undead surrounding them. Eva reassured him not to worry. According to her, the little ghost was much closer to a sprite than a normal undead spirit, so the miasma would not affect it the same way. Eventually, they leaped down from a cliffside, and after traveling a little farther, they finally found the Lich. At that point, Eva stopped and politely apologized for interrupting before asking if they could speak for a moment. The Lich immediately recognized Eva as a high-ranking vampire. However, the Lich coldly stated that it had no time to waste dealing with someone like her and ordered her to leave at once. Hearing that, Eva simply remarked that it was unfortunate. Since words clearly would not work, she decided that perhaps force would instead. Without hesitation, Eva immediately unleashed a fire blast toward the Lich. But before the attack could land, numerous undead suddenly gathered together and shielded the Lich with their own bodies. Eva then lunged forward herself and struck directly through the undead forces. Watching her movements, the Lich realized that the vampire standing before him was the infamous insatiable pureblood. After scattering the undead aside, Eva stepped back while expressing her irritation toward that title, clearly hating the nickname. The Lich then explained that he had seen Eva before long ago and considered it quite an honor to receive a visit from someone like her. At that point, Eva asked whether the Lich finally felt like talking properly now. However, the Lich responded that unfortunately he had no interest in exchanging words with someone who had willingly chosen the path of monsters herself. Hearing that, Eva finally lost patience and mocked the Lich for being an overly talkative skeleton. Then she commanded her servants to rise. From within her own shadow, monstrous creatures suddenly emerged. Eva referred to them as her bloody servants and declared that it was time for dinner. Immediately afterward, the shadow monsters rushed toward the Lich at incredible speed. Despite this, the Lich remained completely calm. In response, countless undead rose from the ground itself and formed a massive shield around him. The undead successfully blocked the attacks from Eva's servants. Eva then pointed toward the battlefield and remarked that even bones would eventually turn to ashes if enough power was applied. Right after saying that, she unleashed another massive fire blast toward the undead army. The resulting explosion was enormous. The sheer impact sent Yuma crashing backward into nearby bushes. Even so, Yuma was shocked to see that the Lich still remained standing after the blast. As the smoke slowly cleared away, the Lich activated black magic and summoned death itself. Moments later, an undead dragon appeared beside him. Even in front of such a terrifying creature, Eva remained completely calm and unbothered. Meanwhile, Yuma stared in complete shock at the sight of a dragon standing before them. Eva casually remarked that the Lich certainly possessed quite an impressive little creature there. The undead dragon began preparing an attack as thick black smoke gathered inside its mouth. The moment Yuma saw it, he immediately realized that whatever was coming next was definitely not good. Acting on instinct, Yuma quickly placed a barrier around Eva. Moments later, the undead dragon unleashed a massive fire blast. Smoke spread throughout the forest after the impact, while Eva praised Yuma for supporting her at the perfect moment. Yuma quietly thought that he did not want to always be the one relying on others. If there was something he himself could do, then he wanted to contribute properly as well. Soon afterward, Eva and the undead dragon clashed high up in the sky. At the same time, the Lich continued firing attacks toward Eva from below. However, Yuma kept supporting her by casting teleportation circles and redirecting the Lich's attacks back toward the undead dragon itself. The Lich quickly recognized that the magic Yuma was using was ancient magic. Realizing that, the Lich remarked that the vampire had apparently picked up quite an annoying little sidekick. Because of that, the Lich decided that he would deal with Yuma personally instead. Then suddenly, the ground nearby slowly began splitting open. Eva immediately realized that something else was finally joining the battle. From deep beneath the earth, a massive monster slowly started rising upward. As the Lich turned to look at the creature, he quietly remarked that it had finally awakened. At that exact moment, Eva immediately dashed straight toward the Lich and questioned whether he truly thought it was wise to turn his back on her like that. Eva then unleashed a relentless series of hand strikes toward the Lich. However, the Lich skillfully avoided every single attack. Meanwhile, behind the Lich, the undead dragon fired another massive blast toward Eva. But thanks to the barrier surrounding her, the attack failed to harm her at all. Eva casually mocked the dragon afterward, remarking that its attack simply was not strong enough. Then suddenly, the undead dragon abruptly flew away while carrying the Lich on its back. Eva remained standing there for a moment in confusion. Almost immediately afterward, frustration overtook her as she demanded to know where they thought they were going before quickly chasing after them herself. Meanwhile, Yuma was left behind and desperately called out for Eva to wait for him. As he tried following after her through the forest, he quickly lost sight of where she had gone. At that moment, the cute ghost caught Yuma's attention again. Yuma asked if the ghost intended to guide him forward. Following after it, Yuma eventually arrived at the edge of an enormous hole deep within the ground. Yuma sat there for a moment, tempted to look down into the massive pit below. However, he immediately decided against it because it simply felt far too terrifying. Besides that, he also started noticing how strangely cold the surrounding area had suddenly become. Goosebumps slowly spread across his body. Then the cute ghost suddenly shifted its attention toward something nearby. As Yuma turned to look in the same direction, he froze in shock. Towering over them was a gigantic monster covered in multiple horns, with a grotesque mouth positioned directly on top of its head. The giant monster slowly crawled closer toward Yuma. Looking at its grotesque appearance, Yuma wondered if it was some kind of giant baby zombie. At that moment, Eva finally returned and immediately asked where the bag of bones had gone. Eva then noticed Yuma's pale expression and asked what was wrong with him. Yuma complained that it was because she had left him behind earlier. Turning her attention toward the giant creature, Eva observed the tangled mixture of unique auras surrounding it. There was no doubt in her mind that this monster was the true source of the miasma spreading throughout the entire forest. She realized that creating this enormous thing had likely been the Lich's true objective all along. Yuma wondered why anyone would create something like this. Eva replied that she could think of several possible reasons. For example, considering how strongly the creature's presence affected the nearby undead, it would easily allow someone to take control over one or even two towns nearby. Then the Lich himself returned once more. Eva casually remarked about his timing as he appeared again before them. The Lich coldly stated that the two of them were becoming a nuisance. Yuma immediately asked the Lich why he was doing all of this and what exactly he hoped to gain by creating such a monster. However, the Lich informed Yuma that he had misunderstood the situation entirely. The Lich explained that the creature was not something he had created in the first place. In reality, the reason he had come to this forest was to seal it away. Moments later, a massive magic seal suddenly appeared high above them. Thick black smoke wrapped itself around the giant's baby-like monster. At that point, Eva finally realized what had truly been happening. The thick smoke continued surrounding the enormous creature until eventually it vanished completely from sight. Afterward, several ghostly children appeared from within the giant zombie. Their souls slowly drifted toward the Lich. One after another, the spirits gathered together and entered directly into the Lich's wand. Watching the scene, Yuma felt conflicted. In one way, the sight felt somewhat comforting, yet at the same time it also felt deeply sad. The strange mixture of emotions left him unsure how to properly feel about it all. The Lich quietly wished for the souls to find eternal rest within him before finally turning around to leave. However, Yuma quickly called out to stop him, saying that he had a request. Yuma explained that there was a child who had been turned into a ghoul by the church and that they were currently taking care of him. But because the child no longer had a master, his body would eventually rot away if nothing was done. Because of that, Yuma told the Lich that they needed him to overwrite the ghoul's control authority. The Lich immediately pointed his staff threateningly toward Yuma and demanded to know whether what he was saying was truly the truth. The Lich warned that if Yuma was deceiving him, there would be severe consequences waiting for him. The two stared silently at one another for several moments before Yuma firmly confirmed that everything he had said was true. After hearing that answer, the Lich simply ordered Yuma to lead the way. Meanwhile, Back in the capital, the townspeople continued living their normal daily lives. Elsewhere beneath a tree, the priest received a report informing him that everything was proceeding smoothly. Hearing that, the priest calmly instructed the messenger to wait for the signal. Then another man approached and addressed him respectfully as Mr. Priest. The man sincerely thanked the priest for the medicine he had provided, explaining that both his daughter and the rest of the townspeople had fully recovered because of it. The priest told the mayor that he was relieved to hear such good news. Nearby, a loud warning suddenly rang out telling everyone to be careful. At that same moment, a monster was swiftly cut down. It was Takuya, who remarked that the situation had been a close call. He then warned the people that the area was still dangerous and instructed them to evacuate toward the shelter immediately. Meanwhile, Kotomi stated that she had already finished purifying the toxins in the area. However, Keita looked completely unimpressed by the entire situation. According to him, the monsters did not even qualify as a proper warm-up. The priest praised the summoned heroes, saying that they had managed to wipe out all the monsters occupying the town with incredible speed. To him, it was truly astounding how much all of them had improved in such a short amount of time. Takuya humbly brushed aside the praise, while Kotomi quietly remained silent nearby. Then Mr. Priest apologized for bringing up another matter immediately after they had just finished dealing with the monsters, but he explained that they had finally discovered where Mr. Yumo was currently being held. Hearing that news, Kotomi immediately reacted with surprise. Mr. Priest confirmed the information and explained that fortunately, Yuma appeared to be unharmed for now. Kotomi felt visibly relieved after hearing that. However, Mr. Priest continued by informing them that according to their sources, Yuma was still under the control of a dangerous vampire. On top of possessing overwhelming combat abilities, the vampire also supposedly had the power to brainwash others. Because of that, rescuing Yuma would likely prove to be extremely difficult. Mr. Priest then added that reinforcements would be prepared to support them during the rescue mission. But before he could even finish speaking, Keita immediately rejected the idea of needing reinforcements at all. He confidently declared that he alone would deal with the vampire himself. Keita also stated that he intended to make the vampire pay back what she had done after blasting him earlier. After that, Keita urged the others to get moving at once. Meanwhile, as the Lich entered the haunted house, the surrounding ghosts reacted with visible fear at his presence. Yuma noticed the tense atmosphere and could not understand why it felt so heavy inside. The Lich then moved closer to the ghoul child. Yuma explained that this was the ghoul they needed the Lich to overwrite the control authority for. After seeing the child, the Lich's demeanor suddenly shifted. He knelt down and stated that everything was his fault before asking for forgiveness. At that moment, a memory surfaced within the Lich. In it, a young boy once told his instructor that he had brought the requested materials, and the instructor had simply told him to leave them there. The Lich then recalled that the child he met in his past life had once encountered him when he was still serving the nation. In that memory, the boy had lingered for a moment, and the instructor had asked what he wanted. The boy responded that he wanted nothing, only expressing that he was honored to be of use to someone as great as the instructor. The instructor had told him to stop with the excessive praise, but the boy insisted it was not flattery. He spoke about how the instructor had fought on the front lines against the Demon Lord's forces and now continued working tirelessly to ease the suffering of war-torn people. Filled with admiration, the boy declared that the instructor was the nation's treasure. The instructor, overwhelmed, told him to stop as it was becoming exhausting and then said he would be heading back to his research. People had recognized him as a famous magical arts instructor. They spoke among themselves, noting how easily recognizable he was even from a distance. At the same time, they also mentioned his reputation for being extremely unsociable. Many had applied to become his apprentice, but he had rejected them all without exception. This only added to his reputation, reinforcing his image as a lone, distant figure. Nearby in that same memory, the instructor noticed a child sitting in front of a flower. He called out to the child and asked what he was doing. When the child looked up, the instructor recognized the clothing and realized the child was an orphan recently taken in by the church. The instructor then asked if the child was worried about the wilted flower. Using magic, the instructor restored the flower, bringing it back to life. The child reacted with joy and thanked him. The instructor gently patted the child's head, and soon other nearby children noticed the scene and quickly gathered around him. A few days later, the instructor noticed something outside. He saw a lantern and assumed it was marking the location of an unused warehouse. He then stepped outside and looked into the warehouse. What the instructor saw inside the facility was a group of researchers conducting experiments on a dismembered child. The sight left him completely shocked. One of the men noticed him and, startled, questioned why he was there. As the instructor looked closer, he realized the child had already lost both arms. His eyes widened at the brutality of the scene. The priest then apologized to the instructor and explained that they still needed him to continue working with them for a little longer. He added that everything being done there was possible because of the instructor's research in the first place. While speaking, the priest quietly prepared a spell and then cast it toward the instructor from behind. The attack struck him, and the instructor screamed in pain before collapsing to the ground. The priest stated that they would be leaving before the instructor regained consciousness. After some time, the instructor eventually regained consciousness. He muttered that he had worked endlessly for the peace of the nation. Slowly rising again, his expression hardened with determination and anger as he declared that he would never forgive them. Later, the calm surroundings of the facility were suddenly destroyed by a massive explosion. Panic spread among the people. The instructor was the one responsible, declaring that everything should turn to ashes. Several magicians surrounded him and attacked in response. After the confrontation, the instructor was left badly wounded and bleeding. They then placed him inside a carriage, later throwing him into a pit. One of the men remarked that the pit was already nearly full. Inside the pit, the instructor was horrified to see numerous severed heads of children surrounding him. He reached out and touched one of them, unable to understand why it had come to this, repeatedly questioning why. With his last breath, he muttered the word, "never," before losing consciousness. Time passed afterward. Through his lingering mana and deep resentment, the instructor eventually transformed into a lich. The children present, born from his lingering grudge, also awakened in their altered forms. The lich then granted them eternal rest. Afterward, it was now the child's turn. The lich began the process of overriding the control authority. Soon after the process was completed, Yuma expressed his thanks. Eva then stated that if the lich could transfer the control authority over to her, their task there would be finished. She then turned and asked Yuma if he had considered what they would feed the child. Yuma replied that if it was him, being immortal, then there would be no need to sacrifice anyone, as he was prepared for that outcome. Upon hearing the word, immortal, the lich became interested. Eva, meanwhile, was surprised and remarked that Yuma was going all out for someone originally sent to assassinate him. She added that she found it impressive and that she herself was also somewhat intrigued. Yuma explained that he simply could not bring himself to abandon the child. Eva responded that she already knew, saying it was the same feeling Yuma had shown when he first saw her. She then turned back to the lich and instructed him to hand over the control authority. However, the lich refused. Both Eva and Yuma were disappointed by his answer. The lich declared that he would personally keep hold of the control authority. Then he turned toward Eva and demanded that she hand over the immortal, Yuma, to him. Eva and the lich stood facing one another with Yuma caught right between them, leaving him completely confused about what was happening. Eva remarked that the lich's proposal was a rather terrible joke. In response, the lich asked whether she had become so old that her hearing had started to fail. Hearing that immediately struck a nerve with Eva. Eva remarked that the lich certainly had a lot of nerve. Meanwhile, Yuma interrupted and politely asked the lich whether he knew the child by any chance. The lich confirmed that he did. Eva dismissed the answer and questioned what that had to do with handing Yuma over to him. The lich explained that an immortal human was an incredibly valuable asset. Turning his attention toward Yuma, he stated that with Yuma by his side, the amount of flesh and bone the child needed to consume in order to survive would decrease dramatically. The lich then told Yuma that in his previous life he had studied ancient magic as well, and if Yuma came with him, he would teach him everything he knew. Eva immediately countered by claiming that it would be far more beneficial for Yuma than the shallow knowledge possessed by some old vampire. She then became offended by the entire idea and made it clear that she had no intention of simply sitting back and allowing anyone to steal Yuma away from her. At that point, Yuma leaned closer to Eva before suggesting to the lich that perhaps he should simply come along with them instead. However, the lich immediately raised his voice and rejected the suggestion. Elsewhere nearby, Davis happened to overhear the commotion and noted that things sounded unusually noisy. Moments later, he heard a knock and concluded that there might be intruders. Deciding to act, he resolved to strengthen the smoke screen. Afterward, he rang a small bell, causing a thick fog to spread throughout the area. Meanwhile, the three summoned heroes noticed that the fog around them had suddenly become much denser. Kotomi calmly stated that she would handle it and summoned Ariel. A small fairy emerged from her book. Using high-level arrow magic, Ariel unleashed a powerful blast that cleared away the fog. Witnessing this, Davis found himself somewhat impressed. He then approached Eva and Yuma and politely apologized for the interruption before informing them that there appeared to be visitors nearby. Yuma immediately became confused and wondered if the newcomers had been sent by the church. But the moment he recognized the three heroes, he was left completely surprised and wondered why they had come all the way there. Yuma quickly became frustrated, realizing that they had arrived at the worst possible time. He then called out to both Eva and the lich and proposed an idea. Outside, Kotomi observed that they had finally found their target. Meanwhile, Eva and the lich stood side by side and agreed that whoever managed to carry out Yuma's plan first would be the winner. Takuya then entrusted support duties to Kotomi, and she accepted. Kotomi immediately began her chant and called upon the spirit of light to grant them protection. At the same time, Keita prepared himself, determined to settle the score. Keita immediately leaped forward and called out to Eva while hurling insults at her. He then unleashed his high-level pyro magic, Inferno, causing a massive cyclone of flames to surround Eva. Satisfied with his attack, Keita remarked that fire worked especially well against undead creatures. He even smugly thought about turning everything to ashes. What Keita failed to realize, however, was that the Eva caught inside the flames had merely been a decoy. The real Eva had already appeared right behind him. She casually informed him that he had fallen for a fake. Keita immediately swung his spear toward her, but Eva effortlessly stopped the attack with her bare hand. She then mocked him, pointing out that she had already managed to get behind him twice now. Clearly irritated, Keita angrily demanded to know who she thought she was looking down on. At that moment, Takuya called out to Keita. However, the Lich stepped forward and declared that Takuya would be his opponent instead. Takuya then planted his sword into the ground and activated his high-level glacial magic, Frozen Shadow. In response, a massive amount of ice erupted from the ground beneath the Lich. But to Takuya's surprise, a strange, thick substance quickly began melting away his ice. It was the Lich's death summon, Poison Slime. The Lich calmly pointed out that ice meant nothing if it could simply be melted away. Afterward, the Lich shifted his attention toward Kotomi and decided that he might as well deal with her too. At the same time, numerous undead rose from the ground behind her. However, tree roots and vines suddenly emerged from the earth and formed a shield around Kotomi, protecting her from the attack. Grateful for the assistance, Kotomi thanked Dryad, the fairy responsible for helping her. Then suddenly, the Lich sensed an attack approaching from behind. Reacting immediately, he created a chunk of ice to block the incoming strike. Takuya then informed the Lich that targeting his younger sister had been a major mistake. Meanwhile, from inside the mansion, Yuma watched the battle through the window and observed that both Eva and the Lich were performing extremely well. Suddenly, an undead creature smashed directly into the window, startling Yuma. However, the creature failed to break through. Yuma was shocked by this because the windows themselves were open, yet nothing from outside had managed to enter. Davis calmly reassured him, explaining that the mansion possessed impeccable defenses against attacks coming from the outside. Yuma remarked that hearing that was a relief. Davis then explained that, just in case, he would excuse himself and attend to any additional protective measures that might become necessary. Yuma agreed and apologized for dragging Davis into all of this. However, Davis reassured him not to worry about such things. Before leaving, Davis added one more warning. In addition to everything he had already explained, spirits were capable of entering the mansion from outside. Because of that, he advised Yuma not to lower his guard during times like these. Hearing that left Yuma wondering what exactly Davis meant. Unbeknownst to him, behind the curtains, a vine had already begun quietly creeping into the room. Meanwhile, outside, Takuya faced the Lich and realized that the Lich's power surpassed anything he had ever encountered before. Looking over at Keita, he also noticed that his companion would not be able to continue fighting for much longer. Then suddenly, a massive tree rose up between Takuya and the Lich. Kotomi declared that their mission had been accomplished and that it was time to retreat. Takuya praised her quick thinking. Afterward, Takuya approached Keita, who was still engaged in battle with Eva. He urged Keita to withdraw. But instead, Keita grabbed Takuya by the collar and angrily told him not to interfere. Takuya tried to calm him down. He reminded Keita that before coming there, he had warned him not to let his grudge get the better of him. Takuya insisted that they should retreat for now and fight another day. However, Keita turned his back on him. Takuya called out to him once again, but Keita remained consumed by frustration. Then he activated his high-level pyro magic, Phoenix. Even Eva looked somewhat surprised upon seeing the spell. Keita quickly jumped onto the Phoenix. In response, Eva mockingly questioned whether, after being the one who started the fight, he was now planning to run away with his tail between his legs. Enraged, Keita lashed out and swore that next time he would reduce her to ashes, telling her to wait until then. Afterward, the Lich calmly observed that the heroes had escaped. Eva scoffed at them and remarked that every last one of them lacked courage. She even mentioned that she had been planning to brainwash Keita once he became exhausted. The Lich immediately objected, pointing out that brainwashing was completely out of the question. If she had done that, she would have forfeited Yuma's proposal. Eva quickly fired back, reminding the Lich that he himself had considered killing them and turning them into puppets. Yet somehow, he was the one talking about forfeiting. Eventually, Eva concluded that they would simply have to think of another way to settle the matter. But then, something suddenly caught her attention. Yuma was gone. Seeing the sprout emerging from the ground, the Lich immediately recognized that it was the work of a spirit user. Hearing that caused Eva's expression to turn grim. She declared that she would not show any mercy when the time came to turn Kotomi into a complete slave. Just then, Davis approached Eva and calmly asked whether she had already forgotten the agreement she had made with Yuma. Before everything had happened, Yuma had proposed an idea. He explained that there were people he knew outside, and they had most likely come looking for them. The Lich questioned whether those people were connected to the church. Yuma denied it, though he admitted that he was not entirely sure. Regardless, Yuma wanted to hear the truth directly from them in order to understand what was really going on. Eva initially responded that if that was the case, Yuma should stay back because she needed an opportunity to vent some frustration. However, Yuma asked her to hold back a little. The Lich questioned why, pointing out that the newcomers were their enemies. Yuma explained that it was not because of any grand reason. They had all arrived together during the same summoning ceremony, and they were the only remaining connection he had to his homeworld. If possible, he wanted things to be resolved peacefully. Remembering those words, Davis reminded Eva not to forget Yuma's feelings regarding the matter. In response, Eva pointed out that Davis himself already knew about everything in the end. Davis calmly stated that, as far as the mansion was concerned, spirits were no less welcome than any other guest. Eva acknowledged that. In the end, she decided that she would simply consider it as Davis owing her a favor. Davis expressed his gratitude for that decision. Afterward, Eva told the Lich that they needed to save Yuma. The Lich replied that if he found Yuma first, then he would assume guardianship over him. In his opinion, that outcome would ultimately be better for Yuma. Eva immediately told him to be quiet. Elsewhere, along a road, a group of bandits was harassing another group of people. Their bald leader warned the captives to stay obedient if they valued their lives, otherwise they would end up like the adventurer lying nearby. He even mocked adventurers, claiming they were nothing special. At that moment, Eva suddenly appeared behind him and sent him flying with a kick. The other bandits immediately became alarmed, wondering if they were under attack. One of them quickly ordered the others to capture her. The bandits rushed toward Eva all at once, but their numbers meant nothing to her. One after another, she effortlessly struck them down. Before long, every single bandit had been knocked flat onto the ground. One of them realized in fear that she was simply too strong. Meanwhile, Eva openly mocked the defeated bandits. The tied-up travelers could hardly believe what they had witnessed. All of those bandits had been defeated in an instant. They wondered who the beautiful woman responsible for saving them could possibly be. One of them guessed that she must surely be a high-ranking adventurer. One of the rescued men thanked Eva despite not knowing who she was. Eva casually replied that there was no need for gratitude. Then, as she placed her hand on the man's head, she remarked that in return, all they needed to do was work for her. Later on, the three men reported the results of their investigation to Eva. From their information, Eva learned about a church facility located in the northern town. The Lich observed that if the building bore the church's coat of arms and had been sealed off, then it was highly likely that members of the priest class were occupying it. Eva admitted that she had never personally met any of those priests before and asked the Lich whether they were strong. The Lich explained that the Imperial Army itself posed no real threat. However, there was one individual among the priest class who stood out as exceptionally powerful. Excelling in holy magic, that particular priest would prove to be extremely troublesome if they ever had to face him. Eva remarked that the Lich sounded as though he knew the man personally. The Lich replied that he had known him somewhat in his previous life. However, he dismissed the matter and instead questioned why Eva was going so far for Yuma. As far as he remembered, Eva had willingly allowed herself to be sealed away beneath the church, and he had assumed that she had already given up on the world. Eva simply answered that she was searching for something. When the Lich asked what exactly she was searching for, Eva admitted that she did not know herself. That was precisely why she had placed such high hopes on Yuma. To her, Yuma was probably the first clue she had found. Quietly, the Lich came to understand her. All of the incidents that Eva had caused over the many years, everything she had done, had been in pursuit of whatever it was she was searching for. At that realization, the Lich remarked that Eva's title of insatiable had merely been an appearance. Meanwhile, inside a room elsewhere, Yuma slowly regained consciousness and wondered where he was. Keita noticed that he was awake. When Yuma failed to remember his name properly, Keita smacked him on the head. Takuya quickly apologized, explaining that Keita had been in a particularly bad mood. As soon as Yuma regained his bearings, he immediately brought up Eva, the vampire. However, before he could finish speaking, Keita's irritation visibly increased. Takuya explained that it had taken all of their combined efforts just to bring Yuma back there. He further informed him that someone from the church would probably come to check on him soon, so he should focus on resting for now. However, the moment Yuma heard that, he suddenly raised his voice and declared that he was leaving. Keita remarked that it really looked like Yuma had been brainwashed. However, Yuma denied it. Instead, he insisted that they were the ones being deceived. Yuma questioned whether any of them had any idea what the church was actually doing behind the scenes. Keita replied that he only believed what he saw with his own eyes. And what he had seen were people living in fear of monsters and monsters themselves harboring overwhelming hatred toward humanity. Hearing that, Yuma fell silent. Keita then declared that once Yuma's brainwashing had been removed, he would understand what he meant. Until then, Yuma should simply stay where he was. Deep down, Yuma wanted to argue against Keita, but the words would not come out. He became frustrated with himself. If Eva had been there instead, things might have been different. At that moment, unfamiliar voices could be heard discussing something. One of the voices commented that the people summoned this time seemed rather capable. The previous ones had not even lasted 3 days before they had been reduced to nothing more than raw materials. Even so, they were still nothing compared to the very first pure summons they had obtained. Another voice dismissed them as weeds, saying that weeds should be pulled out before they could grow out of control. The speaker then mentioned being occupied with dealing with the Demon Lord's forces and strengthening their subordinates. Another person brought up someone else entirely and questioned whether they had forgotten about the pureblood. However, the woman being addressed merely replied that the vampires seemed troublesome, and because of that, she had no interest in dealing with the matter. Soon afterward, a man approached the high priests and informed them that all the preparations had been completed. One of the high priests praised the work and declared that it was time for them to proceed. Acting as agents of God's will and for the sake of the world, they would now welcome the sacrifices of mankind. Meanwhile, standing quietly behind the door, Kotomi had overheard their entire conversation. Kotomi felt relieved that she had not been discovered. She had heard the claims that Yuma had been brainwashed, but something about his reaction earlier had felt strange to her. As she entered the library, she was amazed by the sheer number of books lining the shelves. With such an enormous collection of literature, there had to be information regarding monsters and perhaps even details about the church itself. As she searched through the books and read a few of them, nothing particularly caught her attention. Then Kotomi noticed that the fairy had become interested in something, so she asked what was wrong. The moment she touched the book the fairy was looking at, a hidden door suddenly opened. It was something she had only ever seen in movies before, a secret passage. The sight left her stunned for a moment. She quickly slapped her cheeks and reminded herself that this was no time to stand around in shock. As she stepped inside and descended deeper underground, she thought that the answer she had been searching for might be hidden there. Meanwhile, inside another room, a man approached Yuma and informed him that they had come for him. Trembling in fear, Yuma wondered if he could somehow use teleportation magic to escape from there. Takuya noticed Yuma shaking and asked if he was alright. At that moment, Yuma realized that he was finally able to use magic again. He assured Takuya that he was fine. Quietly, Yuma decided that he would simply play along for the time being, observe his surroundings, and try to understand what was happening. As Yuma followed the man through the halls, he carefully observed everything around him. He noticed 3 guards behind him and figured that they were probably there to prevent him from attempting to run away. He repeatedly told himself to stay calm and not panic. Eventually, they arrived in front of another room. The man informed Yuma that a priest was waiting inside for him. As Yuma entered, the priest warmly welcomed him. The priest remarked that he had been looking forward to speaking with Yuma and stated that it was truly an honor for him. He introduced himself as Richt, the high priest of the central church. After showing Yuma where to sit, he suggested that they get straight to the point. As Yuma stepped closer, Richt mentioned that he had heard rumors that Yuma was capable of using ancient magic. Suddenly, a magical barrier appeared around Yuma's body. The unexpected phenomenon startled Yuma, causing him to instinctively release some of his magic. Richt touched the barrier, causing small sparks to appear. Observing it closely, the high priest remarked that although it resembled a barrier, its properties seemed to be somewhat different. Then Richt calmly stated that it was time to see Yuma go on the offensive. To Yuma's surprise, the high priest was already holding his spirit stone. Yuma was shocked to discover that it was gone and wondered when the priest had managed to take it from him. The priest remarked that he could sense a spirit nearby and asked Yuma whether it was a familiar one. Yuma was shocked that the priest had noticed the little ghost. Realizing that he had to retrieve the spirit stone before anything happened to it, he decided to use teleportation magic to snatch it back quickly. However, before he could reach it, the priest immediately noticed his movement and reacted. Yuma was stunned by the priest's incredible reaction speed. Then, all of a sudden, a spear pierced through Yuma's barrier. Panicking, Yuma realized that his barrier had been broken. The priest calmly pointed out that Yuma had allowed himself to become distracted. He further explained that it seemed Yuma still did not understand the true nature of ancient magic. According to the priest, magic that relied purely on feelings tended to be fragile. He then suggested that Yuma try putting his entire effort into it instead. Confused, Yuma asked himself why the priest was giving him advice. The priest explained that he held a certain interest in ancient magic, so he thought he would lend Yuma a hand, so to speak. Yuma quietly wondered what the priest was really after. Nevertheless, he believed that this was his opportunity. As he prepared himself, the priest noticed his intention and immediately cast a spell, urging Yuma to try countering it. Yuma responded by using teleportation magic. Concentrating intensely, he redirected the priest's attack and sent it back through his teleportation magic. The priest recognized what had happened and concluded that it resembled magic duplication. However, since it was still his own magic, he believed that the duplication itself was merely an illusion. At that moment, Yuma emerged from a teleportation circle and attempted to retrieve his spirit stone. However, the priest reacted once again and remarked that Yuma was still not good enough. But Yuma refused to stop there. He immediately appeared from another teleportation circle on the opposite side and successfully recovered his spirit stone. The moment he got it back, he rolled away to create some distance. The priest clapped his hands and praised Yuma. To him, it had been splendid. He remarked that Yuma had managed to retrieve the spirit stone quite wonderfully. The priest then explained that the magic Yuma possessed had no distinct form, which meant that its possibilities were endless. However, in order to use it properly, Yuma first had to understand it. With that said, the priest searched through the pages of a book. Once he found what he was looking for, he explained that what he was about to show Yuma represented a microcosm of the world they lived in, the world of mankind, monsters, and even the gods. The priest explained that both humans and beasts shared this land, and the balance between the two was maintained by the gods. According to him, if not for the protection of the gods, humanity would have undoubtedly been wiped out centuries ago. The priest explained that the reason for all of this was because, in the distant past, humanity had been nothing more than cattle to monsters. Back then, humans possessed no means to defend themselves against such creatures. Because of that, the gods taught mankind how to perform summoning ceremonies. However, among all monsters, the most terrifying of them all were vampires, especially the one Yuma had been traveling alongside. In particular, the pure blood of Red had brought endless devastation in the past. Her rampages had stained the land with crimson blood, and because of that, Eva came to be known as the pure blood of Red. According to the priest, that was the history of this land, and also the history of the person Yuma had been journeying with. The priest explained that the church existed solely to protect humanity from monsters. Even so, he admitted that the actions taken against Yuma had gone far beyond what was acceptable. He stated that such actions were truly unforgivable and confessed that he himself had been unable to believe what he had heard when the reports first reached him. He assured Yuma that proper atonement would be made. In return, the priest invited Yuma to stand alongside them. But to Yuma, it all sounded like lies. No matter what reasons they gave, the suffering he had endured at the hands of the church had been nothing short of a living nightmare. From the peaceful days of his original world to the time he had spent traveling together with Eva, Yuma reflected on everything he had experienced and everything he had seen. At that moment, Yuma quietly realized that perhaps this was how Akanishi had felt back then. Yuma admitted that even if every single thing the priest had told him turned out to be true, he was no longer the kind of person who would simply accept everything without question. Even if he someday came to regret ignoring the priest's words, even then, Yuma still wanted to remain by Eva's side. The priest accepted Yuma's answer and remarked that it was unfortunate. Because of that, he decided that he would tell Yuma one final thing. He would reveal the truth behind Yuma's power. The priest explained that over the years, he had witnessed many summoned individuals, but among them all, Yuma was by far the most special. According to him, that was because Yuma was the only one personally chosen by the goddess herself. The priest then spoke of the goddess who had bestowed Yuma's gift upon him. However, Yuma admitted that he had absolutely no idea what the priest was talking about. He recalled hearing something about blessings when they had first been summoned into this world, but he had never once seen any goddess with his own eyes. The priest noted that Yuma seemed confused, which was only natural. After all, Yuma had yet to awaken. He then handed Yuma an item and explained that it was the key to awakening his power. Through it, Yuma would come to understand why the goddess had chosen him and learn the truth about himself. The priest gave the item to him freely, making it clear that whether Yuma accepted it or rejected it was entirely his own decision. At first, Yuma hesitated. However, after a moment, he accepted the item. Shortly afterward, a man called out to Richt. When Richt asked what the matter was, the man approached and quietly whispered something into his ear. Upon hearing the report, the priest excused himself, explaining that some urgent business had suddenly arisen. Richt informed Yuma that he would send an envoy to escort him back later, and until then he should remain in the room and wait. But Yuma immediately called out to stop him. He asked Richt whether, as one of the highest-ranking members of the church, he possessed the authority to stop the human experiments. Richt explained that other priests were responsible for that matter, and because of that, he held no real authority over the issue. He further added that those priests genuinely believed that what they were doing was for the greater good, making it much easier said than done to convince them otherwise. Yuma then questioned whether Richt would simply allow his fellow priests to continue their rampage merely because they claimed it was for the greater good. He also wondered whether that was truly the extent of Richt's sense of justice. Richt calmly replied that justice was not something so simple. Someday, Yuma too would come to understand that. However, Yuma insisted that even if he eventually understood, giving up was still not the answer. Richt then placed a hand on Yuma's shoulder and admitted that he understood how Yuma felt. He promised that he would do what he could on his side and sincerely hoped that Yuma would continue refusing to give up. With that, Richt left the room. Outside, the man accompanying Richt nervously remarked that if the head priest discovered that he had allowed the subject to escape, there would be serious consequences. However, before the man could finish speaking, Richt calmly replied that there would be no problem. Richt explained that Yuma gaining power was actually convenient for him. He quietly offered his apologies to the head priest, acknowledging that he was allowing Yuma to roam freely. At the same time, Richt admitted that he looked forward to seeing what Yuma had in store for him. While looking at the crystal that had been given to him, Yuma quietly resolved himself, thinking that whatever happened next, he was prepared for it. But then the crystal suddenly moved. Moments later, something strange occurred. A whirlwind formed around him, leaving Yuma completely confused about what was happening. Meanwhile, outside, two guards were chatting among themselves. One of them remarked that the higher-ups had been acting rather frightening lately. The other assumed he was referring to the human enhancement projects and agreed. He had even heard rumors that a major war was approaching. Human enhancement alone was one thing, but recently the upper ranks had been summoning people and rushing around constantly. One of the guards observed that they seemed to be focusing heavily on military strength lately. The other replied that there used to be more sages in the organization, but the swordsman that had recently joined looked rather intimidating. A few moments later, Eva and the Lich suddenly appeared and informed the guards that they had arrived by invitation. They politely requested to be allowed inside. The guards looked confused, since they had not received any notice regarding such visitors. Then the Lich quietly leaned closer and whispered something into one of the guards' ears. Whatever he said immediately changed the guard's attitude. The guard quickly apologized and allowed them to pass. Eva, however, looked visibly annoyed and complained about having to dress up like the Lich. The Lich reminded her that she had been the one insisting that they sneak inside and told her not to complain about their disguises. Eva remarked that next time she wanted to wear matching outfits with Yuma. Since they were about the same height, she thought they might even look like twins, which sounded rather fun to her. As the two walked down the hallway, Eva suddenly stopped. She had sensed something, though she could not quite explain what kind of presence it was. Meanwhile, inside another room, Takuya noticed that his younger sister, Kotomi, still had not returned. He began wondering where she had gone. Thinking about recent events, Takuya also found himself questioning why those monsters had gone so far as to brainwash Yuma. Perhaps, he thought, they had wanted to make use of a summoned hero's power. Or maybe there was some other reason entirely. Curious, Takuya asked Keita what he thought about the matter. Keita, however, remained silent, lost in deep thought. Noticing the unusual silence, Takuya rubbed the back of his head and remarked that it was unlike Keita to be thinking so seriously. Then suddenly, the door opened. Kotomi entered the room while carrying a teddy bear that gave off a strange and unsettling presence. Takuya quickly approached her, asking where she had been since they had been worried about her. However, he soon noticed that something about her behavior felt unnatural. Kotomi then dropped the teddy bear she had been holding. In the next instant, something bizarre happened. A strange monster appeared out of nowhere, and it seemed to have taken control of Kotomi. Keita and Takuya were both stunned by the appearance of the creature. Before either of them could react, Takuya was suddenly struck down. Keita immediately cried out in alarm. The monster then turned its attention toward Keita, but he managed to evade the attack in time. Keita desperately questioned what was wrong with Kotomi, but Kotomi remained completely unresponsive, causing him to demand an answer from her. Even though he could tell that she was conscious, Keita could not understand what was happening because this behavior was completely unlike her. Suddenly, vines erupted from the ground and wrapped themselves around Keita. Frustrated, he realized that he had lowered his guard. Before Kotomi could reach him, however, a familiar voice echoed through the room. The voice remarked on how nice it was to see Keita again. It was Eva, who had appeared behind him and immediately cut apart the vines. Keita reacted in irritation upon seeing her. Meanwhile, Eva scolded him, pointing out that despite saving him, she had yet to receive any thanks. She added that Keita should instead thank Yuma, explaining that if Yuma had not been so concerned about him, she would never have bothered saving him in the first place. Hearing that left Keita genuinely surprised. Eva then shifted her attention toward the teddy bear lying on the floor. Addressing it directly, she remarked that it was behaving rather childishly and wondered how much longer it intended to continue playing hide-and-seek. To her surprise, the teddy bear acknowledged that Eva had noticed its presence. A shadow slowly emerged from the teddy bear. The presence immediately questioned why a monster like Eva was even there in the first place and complained that she was nothing but a nuisance. And above all else, nuisances were something he hated. Soon, a man fully revealed himself. Eva casually remarked that he had grown into quite a big boy. Meanwhile, Keita was stunned as he recognized the man. He remembered having seen him around before. The man was none other than the fourth high priest. Confused, Keita questioned why someone from the church had done such a thing to Kotomi. However, the fourth priest simply told him to stop whining. The fourth priest explained that he had a bit of an obsession with keeping things tidy. Whenever weeds like Keita grew too much, they started attracting pests. Because of that, he had come to do a little weeding in his garden, so to speak. Frustrated, Keita demanded to know what he meant, pointing out that they had been working together with the church all this time. In response, the fourth priest called him truly pathetic. And it was precisely that kind of attitude that irritated him. According to the fourth priest, summoned heroes were nothing more than tools. As he continued speaking, the vines wrapped around Kotomi tightened even further, causing her pain. Seeing this, Keita desperately demanded that he stop. But the fourth priest warned him not to make any rash moves and reminded him who was controlling the strings of the little puppet standing there. He then revealed that he had been observing them from the very beginning, waiting for the perfect opportunity to eliminate them. That opportunity had finally presented itself when Kotomi began snooping around where she should not have. Unable to do anything, Keita could only call out helplessly for Kotomi. The fourth priest then suggested a little outsider-on-outsider violence. At his command, the monster attacked Keita. Though Keita managed to dodge, he lost his footing. Just then, Eva caught and supported him before he could fall. Eva observed that Keita and the others seemed to be in quite a predicament and teasingly asked whether he wanted a big sister to come save him. At that moment, Keita felt both sadness and frustration. Deep down, he began questioning what the point of everything they had done had been. The fourth priest mocked him and remarked that the answer was simple. Everything they had done had merely been an act of playing heroes. That was the inevitable result, he claimed, when someone did not truly believe in their own sense of justice. Hearing that, Eva simply remarked that it was disgusting. She noted that this was her first time meeting a priest and wondered whether all priests were like this. She then criticized him, comparing him to a child acting all high and mighty toward other children, and questioned why he behaved that way. The fourth priest answered that it was because they were worthless. In his eyes, any summoned individuals who had not been chosen by the goddess were nothing but worthless beings. Those without value were no different from weeds. And naturally, according to him, weeds existed only to be pulled out. Eva was surprised by what she had just heard. She remarked that she had recently encountered quite a few cheeky kids, but this priest truly took the cake. Then she suddenly slapped Keita and told him to say something as well. At that moment, an attack came flying toward them. Fortunately, Eva quickly pulled Keita away and avoided it. She then questioned where all the fire and spirit he used to have had gone. Meanwhile, the fourth priest became irritated after recognizing Eva as the vampire because of her wings. He thought to himself that after this fight, he would have to deal with the security personnel. As everyone stood there, the ground suddenly trembled. All of them became alarmed by the shaking. Eva assumed that it was an earthquake. The fourth priest, however, wondered whether it had awakened. Of all times, it had to happen now. Growing frustrated, he immediately left the room. Watching him leave, Eva questioned whether there was a single man around there with any backbone. More than anything, she wanted to find Yuma quickly. Then Eva noticed something at the back of Kotomi's neck and suddenly realized what was happening. She pulled Keita closer and lent him her enhanced vision, telling him to look carefully. Eva pointed out the pin attached to the back of Kotomi's neck and explained that if Keita removed it, Kotomi would return to normal. However, before that, they first had to deal with the monster's legs. She reminded Keita that he could use pyro magic and told him that she needed him to burn the monster's legs away. If she handled it herself, Eva doubted there would be anything left of Kotomi afterward. Eva explained that the moment Keita burned the vines away, she would seize the opportunity to remove the pin. She warned him not to miss his chance, but Keita seemed completely absent-minded. Seeing that, Eva grabbed him once again and brought him face to face. She firmly told him that if he did not want to regret this moment, he needed to act first and think later. With that, she threw Keita straight toward the monster. While airborne, Keita gathered his magic and unleashed it at the creature beneath him. As the vines restraining Kotomi were burned away, Eva immediately flew toward her and pulled out the pin. Kotomi's eyes slowly closed afterward, and Keita managed to catch her before she hit the ground. Once everything had settled, Eva remarked that things had turned out fine in the end. Keita sincerely thanked Eva for helping them. Eva casually replied that if he ever needed anything, he already knew where to find her. Then she stepped out of the room. Keita remained behind, quietly apologizing to himself for still being so weak. Outside, Eva reflected that she had sensed Yuma's presence but had ended up getting sidetracked. She suspected that someone else had been responsible. The various auras around the area were all mixed together, making it difficult to determine Yuma's exact location. She began to wonder what they were planning. Then, as she entered another room, she was greeted by a shocking sight. Yuma was being restrained by a mysterious floating hand. At that moment, Eva realized something she had completely forgotten. The condition required to use a magi was ancient magic. Yuma found himself dreaming, and within that dream he wondered what he had just been doing. He looked around and questioned where he was, yet for some reason the place felt strangely familiar. Nearby, he noticed a group of men bullying a monster. They were beating him while shouting, demanding to know why he had come to their town and ordering him to leave. Yuma tried to stop the men, but to his surprise, his hands passed right through them. He wondered if this was perhaps a dream, and if so, he wished he could wake up quickly. Then, all of a sudden, a gigantic being appeared before him. Yuma was shocked because he somehow recognized the figure. However, before he could make sense of it, he suddenly woke up. The first person he saw was Eva. She greeted him and asked whether he had a pleasant dream. Yuma quickly sat up and asked why he had been asleep. Eva replied that it was undoubtedly because of the thing that had been holding him. Yuma was startled to see the enormous floating hand nearby. Suddenly, he felt as though his heart was being crushed in a death grip. He struggled to breathe, his vision became blurry, and unbearable pain surged through him. Seeing his condition, Eva quickly embraced him to calm him down. She reassured him that everything was all right and told him to breathe slowly. Eva explained that the hand was not an enemy. If anything, it was an ally. She assured him that the pain would disappear once he calmed down and reminded him that she was right there beside him. Soon after, the hand returned to the crystal that Richt had given him. Yuma noticed the change, and Eva explained that the hand was something he himself had summoned. Eva then told Yuma that long ago, she had heard that a magi user was someone capable of wielding attribute-less magic. Yuma began to wonder whether the person he had seen in his dream had also been a magi user. He then asked Eva how he was supposed to use a magi. Eva advised him not to think too deeply about it. Using a magi was far beyond ordinary forms of magic. To obtain such power, one had to endure extraordinarily dangerous trials. Yuma then asked how he was supposed to overcome those trials. Eva pointed out that even without a magi, he still had her by his side. Yuma admitted that he had always been afraid of regretting his actions, and because of that, he had spent his life running away from everything. But now, he realized that if he failed to face himself, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Understanding his resolve, Eva informed him that the trials ahead were far more painful than the agony he had just experienced. She asked him whether he was truly prepared. With unwavering determination and a firm resolve, Yuma answered that he was. Meanwhile, in another room, the Lich continued searching for information. As he worked, Eva came to mind, and he recalled all of her suggestions regarding disguises and infiltration. Growing irritated, the Lich remarked that her brain had become so necrotic that she no longer understood the meaning of words. After examining the documents before him, the Lich concluded that this was about as much information as he could obtain with ease. From what he observed, the place was far more than a simple facility. A massive amount of documents gathered from various other facilities had been collected there. Sensing that something was not right, the Lich became suspicious. Looking closer, he noticed traces suggesting that something had been deliberately concealed. In frustration, he concluded that there was no helping it. He approached a man lying nearby and grabbed him by the head. Since the man possessed the answers, the Lich decided that he would simply ask him directly. After extracting the information, the Lich realized that this had been what they were hiding all along. He began to wonder whether the church had been conducting a large-scale experiment. As he wandered through the underground streets, he eventually arrived at a certain location and sensed something hidden farther inside. What he discovered was a magi chained up and restrained. The sight left him questioning why something so dangerous was being kept beneath the streets of the town. The Lich noted that detecting presences around the area had been unusually difficult, but it must have been due to the barrier erected to conceal the creature. He remarked that if he were still alive, even he would have turned pale at such a sight. He then ordered the man to explain. The man revealed that the Magi had been discovered together with underground ruins 10 years ago. After extensive investigation, they had concluded that it was the Magi of the Moon, a being that fed upon magicules. The Lich was familiar with the Magi of the Moon, having read about it in records from ancient times. At that moment, he finally understood why the church had wanted Yuma so badly. Their objective had been to gather all magic itself. The Lich then demanded to know what the church intended to do with the Magi. The man revealed the plan. They intended to have it consume all the world's magicules and wipe out every magical beast. Once that was accomplished, the world would belong solely to humankind. The Lich asked whether those words had come from one of the head priests. The man denied it. Curious, the Lich demanded to know whose words they really were. They belonged to the first-rank high priest, Richt Albelorenz. Upon hearing the name, the Lich remarked that it was just as he had suspected. Everything traced back to Richt, a man possessed of incredible will, and beneath it all, a darkness deep enough to blot out the sun itself. Back when the Lich had still been working alongside the church, he remembered his first meeting with Richt. Even then, he had sensed that there was something dangerous about the man. However, none of that mattered at the moment. Right now, the Magi of the Moon was his greatest concern. He reflected that if the church's plans succeeded and all the magicules vanished from the world, then the four great spirits of the seasons would lose their power as well. Once that happened, the world itself would quickly begin to collapse. The Lich knew that there was still much he did not understand. He believed that if he could uncover the details of their plan, he might be able to stop it. But his thoughts were interrupted by the approach of another man. The man informed the Lich that the area was restricted to outsiders. He asked whether the Lich had come from the human strengthening program. As he looked closer, the man felt that he had seen the Lich somewhere before. Then suddenly, recognition dawned upon him. He realized that the figure before him was the great instructor. Without hesitation, the Lich slammed the man against the wall. He apologized coldly, explaining that he did not have time for idle conversation. Yet the man appeared delighted. He remarked that it was only fitting for the great instructor. Not even death itself had managed to prevent him from returning. He further insisted that they should dedicate themselves for the greater good. The Lich then realized something. The person responsible for leaking his research to the church had been this very man. He urged the man to leave the church while he still could, warning him that their methods were nothing but poison. Confused, the man asked what he meant. He declared that if it was truly for the greater good, then he would gladly accept a little poison, or anything else required. The man then reminded the Lich that he had fought on the front lines himself and questioned whether he had said anything wrong. In response, the Lich simply ordered him to remain silent. The Lich told the man that he would set him free, and then a black smoke shaped like a scythe appeared from the Lich. He told the man that now he could finally rest. At that moment, the surrounding walls were slashed apart. The man stood there in shock, and the Lich asked if he was finally awake now. He told him that he had always been too serious, just like back then. The Lich reminded him that if he truly wanted to save the world, then he must not lose himself and should continue living strong. The Lich observed that the church was no longer what it used to be. Looking at the man before him, the Lich became certain of that. He believed that if he simply allowed them to continue unchecked, it would only bring more danger. Because of that, the Lich decided that he would destroy the facility. He then asked the man if he knew a way out, but the man remained unresponsive. The Lich grabbed his cheek and asked again. The man finally responded and confirmed that he did know. The Lich instructed him to hold out his hand, and then he summoned something onto it. The Lich explained that it was a scowl. It was weak and possessed no fighting abilities, and he instructed the man to safely take it out of the place for him. The Lich gave it to him as his superior, and this was his final order. The man looked at the scowl and acknowledged the order before running away. With that done, the Lich declared that it was time to clean the place up, and he returns to his original Lich form. Several undead rose from the ground. The people inside the facility scattered in panic and fled as the undead began swarming the entire facility. A voice announced that it was an emergency, reporting that intruders had been detected and ordering everyone to deal with them immediately. The Lich thought that moving the Magi without awakening it was impossible, but if he simply destroyed the facility as it was, he doubted that the church would just give up. In that case, the Lich decided that he would fill the entire place with a thick fog of miasma, making it impossible for any living being to make its way inside. However, someone suddenly appeared on the scene. It was another priest who stood in the Lich's way. The Lich recognized the man as the third head priest, the puppet user. The Lich told the third head priest that a Magi was not something that the church should possess. He gave him two choices: give up or die. The third priest remarked that it simply was not his day, and whatever happened with the Magi meant nothing to him. However, he could not allow pests like the Lich to run wild. In response, the Lich wondered if there were no reasonable humans left anymore. As the two faced each other, the Lich decided to start off small. One of his undead suddenly lunged forward to attack, but the priest avoided it. Another monster attacked from the side, yet the priest dodged once again and countered with a kick to its face. Then another monster crept out from the wall behind him, crawling outward in preparation to strike. Before it could attack, the priest ordered his summon to mow them down, and a series of attacks quickly destroyed the monster. A doll-like creature summoned by the priest then stood before him. The Lich looked at that hunk of junk and questioned whether the priest really thought he could play with his toys. The priest made it clear that he had no interest in playing against the dead. The Lich found that interesting, noting that he had never played with dolls, even during his childhood. Growing irritated, the priest decided to end the battle and activated his artificial eye. The Lich became curious about the eye and noticed that the fundamental qualities of the priest's magic were changing. At the same time, the doll-like creature transformed into its battle form, Night Doll. The Lich wasted no time and ordered the undead to attack. However, the Night Doll immediately reacted, charging forward and cutting down the undead one after another. The Lich observed that the priest had managed to increase his magical output through the artificial eye, which he found interesting. Then, as he raised his wand, a dark circular sphere began to form. The priest activated Night Doll's shield, blocking the Lich's attack. As the attack partially struck the doll, the priest also suffered damage. The Lich noticed this and pointed out that using a type of magic that harmed its user equally was practically suicide. He questioned why the priest would choose to fight in such a manner. The priest remained firm, believing that if it helped him achieve his goal, he would do anything. Moments later, the night doll moved right in front of the Lich, causing the Lich to remark on its incredible speed. But before anything else could happen, something suddenly descended from above and smashed the night doll into the ground. The Lich was left confused by what had just happened, while the third priest suffered severe injuries. A giant hand burst through the ceiling, and upon seeing it, the Lich could hardly believe it. Then Eva appeared behind him and confirmed what he was seeing. She informed the Lich that Yuma was ready. The third priest grew frustrated as yet another opponent entered the scene. He wondered if that attack had come from their subject. After recognizing the giant hand, he found it hard to believe what he was witnessing. Eva then declared that it was time to witness Yuma's resolution. The Lich remarked that Eva had spoken about witnessing Yuma's resolution, yet all he could see was a single-armed magi. He questioned whether he had been right in thinking that Yuma still had not gone through the necessary trials, and he warned that if Yuma was not careful, things could go wrong. Eva, however, assured him that everything was fine. Moments earlier, Eva had told Yuma that she, someone even more dependable than the goddess, was there for him, and she asked whether he was ready. Yuma answered that he was. Satisfied with his response, Eva agreed and suggested that they should give it a little test run. Yuma wondered what she meant by that. Eva explained that they were inside a church facility, so even if Yuma completely destroyed the place, it would not be a big problem. She also warned that going over the top could be dangerous. Just in case Yuma lost control, Eva assured him that she would handle it. Yuma quietly appreciated her words. He lowered his head and entrusted himself to her care. Eva then muttered the word, nightmare. She explained that she would teach Yuma just one thing. The Magi responded to the strong hopes of its user. With that in mind, she had a question for him. She asked Yuma what the worst outcome would be for him. Yuma quietly repeated those words to himself, but suddenly Eva collapsed onto him, and a voice told him to run. At the same time, Eva muttered the word, hope. It was the power to reject the worst possible outcome. Soon after, Yuma began transforming into something else. Back in the present battle, the third priest continued controlling his night doll and directed it to attack Yuma. However, the Magi's hand kept getting in the way. It grabbed the night doll and hurled it into the pillars. Eva cheered for Yuma. Slowly, Yuma descended deeper into the facility, and from far away, he could still hear Eva's voice. He realized that things were not good. Staying conscious was already taking everything he had. He felt that if he lost focus even slightly, his consciousness would sink into the depths. He knew that he simply had to keep his attention fixed on the enemy. The Magi's hand remained behind Yuma, and the Lich observed that Yuma truly seemed to be controlling the Magi. Eva then told the Lich not to interfere with Yuma's path. In her view, it was the duty of adults to sit back and watch children grow. The Lich mocked her and questioned whether she was trying to act like his mother. Eva responded that everyone was basically a child in her eyes. The Lich apologized, but stated that he was not as green as a child. After that, he dropped a thick black substance onto the ground, and it slowly crawled away somewhere. Meanwhile, the third priest continued controlling his night doll, and this time he directed it to attack the Magi's hand. The third priest then shifted his gaze toward the Magi and quietly thought about it. Even though it was only an incomplete single hand, it still frustrated him. Deep in his mind, he dismissed it and questioned what difference it made even if it was a Magi. A memory slowly resurfaced in Eiji's mind. It was a scene from long ago, when his sister told him that he must not cry. The two of them had made a vow together. His sister believed that they served God and protected people, and because of that, there would be no tears. She encouraged Eiji to wipe away his tears. In response, Eiji resolved to become strong enough to protect his sister. Stronger, stronger, and even stronger. Another memory surfaced. A man had apologized to Eiji and explained that the amount of magical energy a person possessed was predetermined. According to him, it was impossible to increase it any further. Frustrated by those words, Eiji left the room. As he walked through the hallway, he encountered the priest with eyeglasses, who remarked that the timing was perfect. The priest with the eyeglasses explained that they had recently completed their research on increasing magical energy by using the harvested eye of a summoned one. The eyes had already been distributed to the priests, but as Eiji could see, one remained. The priest also pointed out that Eiji himself was aiming to become a priest. To Eiji, the summoned were outsiders. They were not the people they were tasked to protect. If they were to achieve their goal, there could be no hesitation. Everything was for the sake of his sister and for the future that she wished for. Back in the present battle, Eiji threw something above himself. Suddenly, something wrapped around his body and transformed him into a battle-type warrior. With his resolve set, he decided that he would deal with the trash. Eva observed that for a puppeteer to turn himself into a puppet, she wondered what he hoped to accomplish. At that moment, Eiji dashed forward and unleashed a strike toward Yuma. However, the Magi's hand blocked the attack. The Lich noted that despite the Magi being incomplete, Eiji had still managed to land a hit. Eiji charged forward once more, determined not to let up. He continuously unleashed attack after attack, but the Magi's hand blocked every one of them. Eventually, one strike broke through and struck Yuma directly in the body. Eiji wondered whether it had worked. However, Yuma quickly regenerated. Eiji recognized it as the blessing of immortality. Because of that, he found it difficult to think of Yuma as a fellow human. Meanwhile, Yuma realized that his reactions to Eiji's movements were becoming slower. His own consciousness was holding him back. With that realization, he decided to let it sink. He would descend into the depths, and toward the power that lay within them. Eiji became irritated and thought that if Yuma was going to sleep talk, then he should at least stay asleep. But at that moment, something massive began to grow. Another huge arm emerged from Yuma. Eva was surprised to see that even the Magi user underwent changes in appearance, something she apparently did not know. The Lich questioned her, wondering how someone over 1,000 years old could still have things she did not know. He explained that Magi users served as the bridge between humans and demonkin. Because of that, their appearance changed into something that stood between both races. According to him, that was one of their special traits. Furthermore, such beings existed closer to gods, which was why other humans also desired their power. Long ago, people had hoped and searched for a Magi user, wishing for a hand that could save humanity. However, the Lich remarked that such things were nothing more than legends recorded in ancient texts. The Lich then decided that it was about time for him to leave and informed Eva that she could handle the rest. Eva replied that she had been planning to leave as well. Meanwhile, the third priest brought out his long-range weapon. After preparing it, he threw it toward Yuma. Yuma easily avoided the incoming attack, but in the next instant, the weapon wrapped around him. The priest immediately pulled him over and slammed Yuma into the wall. Not stopping there, he followed up with an impaling attack, causing debris to collapse toward Yuma. However, the attack dealt no damage. Yuma simply destroyed the debris. Standing on the opposite side of the fallen pillar, Yuma placed his hands on it and used magic to send it directly at the priest. The priest controlled the pillar and redirected it into the sky, where it crashed into the ceiling. Even the people outside witnessed the impact. Eva was stunned when she saw the massive hole. Meanwhile, the priest realized that they were now above the town. He could not accept it. At that rate, if the battle continued, it would damage everything his big sister had worked so hard to protect. While they were still in midair, Yuma suddenly appeared right in front of him. The priest immediately moved out of sight and dashed in the opposite direction. Without hesitation, Yuma gave chase, while the priest provoked him to follow. The priest realized that overusing his eye could be fatal, but he no longer had time to worry about that. He stopped and activated the artificial eye once again, casting the magical power of fortification. Suddenly, he felt as though his veins were bursting, but he resolved to endure the pain. In his mind, he believed that if he could not endure this much, then he would never reach the same level as the Richt. Yuma stood there without showing any reaction, quietly muttering the word, enemy. Then both of them charged straight at each other, each determined to bring an end to the other. They unleashed powerful punches, and their fists collided, creating a massive shockwave from the impact. The priest urged himself to hold on just a little longer, but with Yuma's determination he simply uttered the word, begone. Instantly, Eiji's armor and shield shattered apart, leaving him exposed. Yuma then delivered a powerful punch that sent the priest crashing into the ground. Eiji leaned against the wall while Yuma landed in front of him. Yuma stared at him for a moment before deciding to throw a final punch that would end his life. Just before the attack could land, a voice stopped him, telling him that he had gone too far. It was Eva, who blocked the punch and warned that if he continued, Yuma would only end up hurting himself. She told him to wait for the proper time, but for now, it was time to go home. But Yuma's eyes remained fixed on Eiji, and his intent had not changed. His huge arm slowly dissolved, leaving Eva confused about what had just happened. Then an explosion erupted, but Eva managed to grab Eiji and save him from the blast. Eiji insisted that things could no longer be stopped and warned Eva that many people would die because of her whims. Eva pointed out that he was still as talkative as ever. She suggested that he simply sit back and watch how things were done. Yuma approached the two of them, and as he drew near, Eva attempted to stop him. However, Yuma suddenly shifted his position and appeared directly behind her. He immediately tried to snatch Eiji away from her, causing Eva to realize that he was much faster than she had expected. Eva quickly dashed away from Yuma and realized that if things continued like this, Yuma's boundaries would become increasingly blurred. Unsure of what to do next, she shifted her attention to the Lich, who was casually staying nearby. She landed beside him and approached him, prompting the Lich to ask what she wanted. Not long after, Yuma also landed right in front of them. As Yuma once again attempted to take Eiji from Eva, the Lich stepped forward and blocked him. He reminded Eva that she had claimed she would take care of this herself. Eva grew irritated and told him to give her a break. Raising her voice, she asked the Lich not to be so stingy and pleaded for his help, asking him to keep Yuma's attention occupied. The Lich remained silent for a moment before speaking to someone. He mentioned that he had wanted to let them rest a little longer and asked for forgiveness as he summoned a ghoul, explaining that his help was needed. Soon, the ghoul appeared on the scene. Meanwhile, Eva kept her attention on Eiji and pointed out that he himself had said that Yuma could not be stopped. She also reminded him that all of Yuma's companions present were undead and asked whether he had forgotten that none of them could die. The ghoul attempted to stop Yuma and managed to send him away from the area. However, Yuma could not be stopped and forced his way through the ghoul. The Lich observed that merely shaking them off demonstrated considerable power. Even so, he resolved that he would not allow Yuma to get past them. The ghoul then quickly clung to Yuma's back. Twisting his arm, the ghoul grabbed hold of something and once again sent Yuma flying away. While in midair, Yuma caught sight of Eiji and immediately dashed toward him. He resolved that he had to destroy his target, and with that determination he impaled him. However, moments later, it was revealed that it had been Eva all along. She informed Yuma that she had caught him. As Eva touched Yuma and called out his name, urging him to come back, the pitch-black space within Yuma's mind slowly began to disappear. In that darkness, he saw a little ghost waiting for him, guiding his path until he eventually reached a white space. There he saw young Eva. In that place, Eva gently urged him to return home. Yuma wondered where that home was and questioned where his place truly belonged. Suddenly, back in the physical world, Yuma collapsed into Eva's arms. He told her that he felt as though he had always known her. Eva recalled that when they formed their pact, the taste of his blood had somehow felt nostalgic. However, she did not understand why, since there were large gaps in her memories. Even so, she decided that for now, she simply wanted to welcome Yuma home. In response, Yuma thanked her. Resting against her, Yuma fell asleep, and Eva remarked that after causing such a huge mess and then going straight to sleep, he was just like a baby. Nearby, the Lich observed that the lunar magic the church had been hiding was merely a superficial shell. Eva became curious about his meaning. The idea that the church had hidden only the shell of a magic left her wondering what they had truly been after. The Lich concluded that something seemed to be happening within the church itself, and he advised that they should leave before reinforcements arrived. Eva smiled and asked whether they would be leaving together. The Lich fell silent for a moment before admitting that he needed her help in keeping the boy under control. Eva readily agreed. Besides, the Lich believed that when Yuma woke up, he would be happy to find himself surrounded by friends. And as they departed, many challenges still lay ahead of them. Yuma's battle had only just begun. Meanwhile, a report was delivered stating that those were all the forbidden texts they had managed to recover so far. The priest with eyeglasses reflected that even stories needed time to rest. In his eyes, fate was far more unpredictable than people imagined. The other priest closed his book in agreement and concluded that they should prepare themselves for the story that had yet to be written.